Hey everybody, Digibro here. So, possibly one of the questions I get the most frequently, mostly because of the fact that I encourage people to become writers so often. I'm always telling people that they should try making videos. I'm always trying to make it so more people will jump into the anime analysis game. And as a result of this, people are often asking me for advice on how to do that. Now, I've given a lot of technical advice on like how to literally make videos and record stuff, but one of the questions I get the most often is just how to become a better writer, how to think more analytically, how to come up with ideas for stuff. And honestly, that's the hardest question to answer because the answer is to practice forever. As you can see here, this is a post I wrote June 3rd, 2007 on my anime blog. So this is almost 10 years ago. It's been nearly 10 years that I've been writing about anime. Now, I need you... The reason that all my old posts are up, everything I've ever made on the internet is still online. You can find literally anything I've ever posted, unless it was like set to private for some kind of personal reason at some point. You can find it online. And the reason I leave it all up is so that you can understand how much my writing style has evolved and changed and how much better I've gotten over time. I want this stuff out there to be encouragement to writers, that you can look at some of my really old posts and you're probably already better than I was at the time. In 2007, I would have, I would have turned 16 that year. So this would have been written when I was 15. Now, as you can see, I have 1,000 tabs open because I'm going to read a bunch of my posts and I'm going to analyze what was wrong with them and what I've changed over time. This way that, at the very least, while I can't give you experience and like make it so you've written as much as I have, I can at least give you some hints on what I learned from myself over the years, what I continue to change and try to do better, and maybe it'll help you to get a jump start so that you don't have to take 10 years to get as good as I am. So, alright, here's a review I wrote of Simone back in 2007. I'm going to read it for you. Spoiler warning. Okay, just got done watching this amazing series, and now I'm ready to share my thoughts. Simone is a great show for plenty of reasons. Now, it does have its faults, but by the time the show is over, you'll have forgotten all about those. Looking back at it, I really wish I had been around when this show was being heavily talked about, because I would have loved to give the play-by-play of every episode. This show was truly driven by great dramatic moments that made you say ZOMG, as well as a cast of characters that you couldn't help but love, except Flo. I always hated her. In any event, the ending was really great. It really could have ended at episode 25, and I'd be saying it was a great ending, but I think it was episode 26 that really changes one's perception on the series as a whole. The epilogus ending for each episode were great, but the ending filled me with a deep sadness as well. Essentially, it was like the ending of 1984 all over again. I don't know what that means. On the other hand, I want to say that that was a great story, and look at how happy the characters are, but on the other hand, I have the insatiable urge to stab someone. So yeah, as you can tell, I said nothing in this whole opening segment of this post. All of this could just be deleted. But this is the bulk of it. Like, this just gets into spoilers, and now I just talk about the ending. Which, by the way, spoilers for Simone, I guess. They resigned to their fates. They are happy, yes, and their endings for some of them went just how I'd wanted. For others, it was a total twist. But for all of the ones who did resign, I was pissed the fuck off. Don't ask me why. It always makes me cry to see an ending like this. My romantic heart is filled with sadness, I might say. I don't even want to talk about it, TT. On another note, my favorite ending was Dominura and Lemonade, blah, blah, blah. I can't even read the rest of this. The point is, this is fucking vapid. I'm not telling you anything about the show. All I'm telling you is literally how I reacted to it, but with no information on why I reacted that way. What about this show was interesting? Why was it good? What were the things that would make you say ZOMG? There's no information about Simone in here. There's only information about my reactions to Simone. So, I think maybe this is why I have the so-called, gonzo style that I think most people come from a baseline of trying to talk about a show from more like summary-driven reviews and then start to work in more of their personal angle. This is my background, just literally describing just my own reaction to something and not even the show. So for me, it's working backwards from here. Yeah, so needless to say, that was not a great post. Um, I'm gonna hunt through and find some more stuff to read that'll be good. Oh Lord, here we've got a post called Hitohira, thanks for making me cry, from about a month later. In this one, I go through episode by episode and like explain my reactions, I guess. After Ep 2, once more thanks to Shio's recommendation, I am now DD. Oh, I think these are copied from a forum or something. Like, these are each a forum post I made after the episode. Again, there's no information in here. This is just my reactions. Now, I'm going to be trying to keep this to stuff that I have talked about more than once over the years so that you can see the evolution of how I talked about them, which we're going to get to further Simone posts later in this. And then we've got Manabi Straight. Now, you may recognize this image and what the subject of this post will be from my first episode of the Old Ass Anime Cast, where I told my whole story with this show. So, this is the post I wrote about it August 27th, 2007. So, this would have been the actual, like, after I watched the show and had that big reaction to it while I was going into 11th grade, this is the post I wrote about it. So, let's see how I explained it back then. So, to start, a couple days ago, my brother and I marathon Manabi Straight. I was initially watching this show when it was first being subbed, but I lost track around episode 8 and simply never got back to it. Little did I know how much my timing would affect my perception of the show. Anyone who's watched both Manabi and Hitohira will immediately draw parallels between the two. First of all, because both are stories about small groups who want to fight against all odds to keep their club alive. In a lot of ways, though, the stories are sort of opposite. In Manabi Straight, Mikan starts as the only member of the student council, but gradually... So, okay, right off the bat, I'm bringing up a completely other show, talking about it for no reason, and anyone who hasn't seen Hitohira will have no idea what I'm talking about, and I'm not making like a meaningful connection here. I'm just kind of explaining the fact that there's these two shows that are kind of similar. I'm not like showing how their similarities say something about each one or anything. It's just kind of saying like, yeah, this other show is kind of similar. Finally, further down, I do say that Hitohira probably does a better job exploring this part of the journey, if only because it took a couple more episodes after the big event, blah, blah, blah. So there is a little bit more of, like, starting to get a little analytical in here, where I'm starting to think about... Here, I'll just read this whole thing. After this whole long journey, this battle to preserve that one moment, all the growth that comes along with it, the intense struggle, when you reach the pinnacle of your journey, what happens next? That's the million-dollar question. In Hitohira, there's a lot of drama put into Mugi's last attempts to hold on to her time of happiness, and he wanting to stay with her senpai and others who have to move on. In Manabi, it's more collective, as we know everyone will be moving on together, and Mikana is relieved of her stress much easier. I think Mikana said... So, alright, if I had to say what my biggest problem with this is that having not seen these shows in 10 years, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like me currently is reading this and has no idea what me then meant by this, because there's just no explanation. I really seem to have written this assuming that you would have, like, just watched both shows and know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, alright. Meanwhile, Manabi's ending is much more fulfilling. We see everyone move on, we see them happy in their future, and we see Mikan come back for a visit, and we know exactly how it goes for them. Can't tell you how thankful I was for this ending, though right after watching this show, I had a complete breakdown and was bawling my head off. And then I just got like a sweat drop smiley face. I guess I was trying to neutralize how depressing that sounded. I had a complete breakdown and was bawling my head off. Oh my god. Being a child about to go into the 11th grade, I have a lot of questions about my future, and I'm terrified to have to walk out into the world. Hitohira was like a reflection of my own feelings in Mugi. I'm just like her, timid and not ready for what's ahead. So seeing Manabi Straight bringing everyone into the future and showing that there really is a great time to be had, and that your life isn't going to change to the point of destruction, was greatly appreciated. I don't really want to talk about myself too much here, but I have to say Manabi Straight gave me a lot of confidence in my future and was really a moving experience for someone in a position like my own. Now, I know I tell this story again a year later, in another post where I go into much more of the detail that I did in the podcast. I think it's fucking hilarious that the potentially most interesting thing I had The most interesting experience I could relate about the show was boiled down to one sentence that ends in a sweat drop emoji face. Great. Yeah, let me find another post. All right, so this was the earliest, like, thought piece I could find from myself. Like, in the early days of my blog, all of it was either reviews of a show I just finished, mostly in the style of what I've shown so far, or, like, episodic posting. And all throughout my blog's history, there was episodic posting, but it was always for first episodes, or, like, the first 3 or 4, because I would never, ever finish a show. So, like, I'm not going to read any of that stuff because it's all kind of the same. And that stuff, and there's a lot of posts that we'll kind of see in here that would eventually become stuff I would make vlogs about today as opposed to writing about. But yeah, so this is the Gainax theory, good is good. All right, which, I mean, just sounds ridiculous. Seeing as how it's considered amongst the anime classics, I decided to check out Tapo Nerai 2, and after 2 episodes I can already definitely say it's an excellent show. Looking at their page on Wikipedia, it seems that just about everything Gainax does is excellent, in fact. Actually, to be more accurate, I haven't seen most of their shows, but I've seen most of them in various favorites lists, and after all, they did produce 3 of my top 6 favorite anime, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Fooly Cooly, and Gurren Lagann, and judging on the first 2 eps, I'm going to love Die Buster just as much. A lot of people probably say, yeah, what's your point? But I know a lot of others will be thinking I'm a Gainax fanboy. The thing is, it actually bothers me. I am at least mildly aggravated by the fact that one company can produce so many great shows. My reasons for that are not easy to explain, but I think it partly has to do with not wanting to be a fanboy. Or maybe I'm just pissed at people who are willing to call me that. In some ways, I think that good is simply good. That should be obvious, but somehow it isn't, I think. It stands to reason that if Gainax has produced a number of great things, then it must be a great studio. It's kind of like how there's never been a bad Zelda game. This was before Skyward Sword, by the way. A lot of people will call you a Zelda fanboy for thinking so, but it doesn't matter because the games are just always good. Then again, I guess it really is a matter of opinion. I mean, I like a ton of Shaft shows, but I'm pretty sure there's someone out there who'd get pissed off by their artsy crap. And after all, everyone and their grandma raves about Hayao Miyazaki, and I'm of the opinion that he's good, maybe even great, but not one of my favorites. Oh Lord, this is hard. It's perfectly possible to make a lot of great shows and a lot of absolute shit, as we see in Gonzo's case. I mean, you'd think the guys who did NHK, Genkutsu, etc. would be geniuses, but I mean, just look at Dragonaut. But if a company is just generally amazing with maybe 1 or 2 slight mishaps, I haven't seen He Is My Master, is that one any good? It stands to reason that they are a downright great company. I don't really know what my point is, but my friend keeps making fun of me for loving Shinbo when he happens to be a huge Final Fantasy dork, so I'll leave it at that. I don't know what that means. So, yeah, like, this is just a weird, misguided post. I don't really know what the point of it is. I don't know what it means. I guess I just was saying I'm not a fanboy just because the studio makes good shows, is what my point is. But there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of, like, what a studio is here. Like, what I should be saying is that, like, the directors of those shows are good, and that, like, yeah, I mean, sure, Gainax is great, and they made a lot of great shows, but I also haven't seen most of their shows, so I shouldn't be even talking about how much I love the studio when I don't even really know that much about them, clearly. I mean, going by what I'm seeing here, it sounds like I had just looked at their Wikipedia page for the first time and discovered the fact that this one studio had made so many shows I like, and I'm already throwing my hat in to talk about this studio authoritatively. And apparently I don't like Hayao Miyazaki all that much, but yeah, I feel like I've said nothing in this post. And here's also what a lot of my big idea posts would be like back then, which is just to point something out and not even attempt to explain it. Slice of life and shoujo ai going hand in hand. So I watch a lot of slice of life, though it tends to be inadvertently. I really like the genre, and I think my biggest influence in that regards is that most shows of their genre feature entirely or mostly female casts. And what can I say? I like female casts. In my experience of watching slice of life, I've noticed that a lot of the anime feature shoujo ai elements. To give examples, first off, Hinamori Sketch, Lucky Star, Ichigo Marshmallow, Kokoro Toshokan, Yokohama Kaidashi Kiko, Sketchbook Full Colors, Azumanga Daioh, Binbo Shimai Monogatari, and Potamayo. And the shows that aren't full-on slice of life but have heavy elements of the genre, Haibane Renmei, Read or Die, Figure 17, and Kurao. I haven't seen it, but it sounds that way. And Manabi Straight. Anyway, the most obvious reason for the girl love is that the shows have such a mostly female cast, but I also think it's because a girl-likes-girl relationship might seem more soft to fit the tone of a more gentle anime. In any event, I find it funny that I can consider myself a slice of life fan, but a lot of those shows, my favorite element is the shoujo ai. XD. So what do you think about it? Got a better explanation, or just want to say how it makes you feel personally? So, yep, I mean, I guess it's a fine observation that literally anybody could make, but hey, this was 2007. Not a lot of people were talking about cute girls doing cute things shows, so I guess this was an original observation to my mind. Alright, here's an interesting one that I know gets brought up a few more times throughout my history. Perfection versus brilliance. Now, this is, you've probably heard me give rants about, like, objectivity and subjectivity and all that stuff. This is before I knew those terms, and I was trying to grapple with these kinds of concepts. Using the word perfection is probably practically saying my vocabulary sucks. However, it's the best way I can think of for this argument to make sense, and besides, I see it in what I speak of. There are shows that I consider perfect, but not because of how great the show is or how much I like it. In fact, my all-time favorite anime could not be called perfect. However, I think that there are definitely anime that are perfect and others that are brilliant. The reason I came to this conclusion is that among my favorite anime, there are episodes that I don't like or parts that I would change or remove. The best examples would be my all-time favorite anime, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. I'll admit this show had some problems. Episode 4 was lame, 5 was more boring, there was a lot of stalling in the story progression. However, in the end, good far, far, far outweighs the bad, and it ends up as probably the greatest anime ever. I'm sure I spelled it that way on purpose. This rings true for a lot of my favorites. Haruhi, we all know Chronological 14 was lame. NHK didn't like the pacing around the late teen episodes. And Neon Genesis Evangelion, some eps are just boring. Weird, this face. However, all of them are brilliant in their own right. So what makes an anime perfect? In my eyes, a perfect anime is one that utilizes every episode and every moment as part of the whole, and without any single scene, the series value would decrease, or something vital to the show would be gone. And yes, shows like that exist. Most recently, and in my favorite case, there's Baccano. This is a show that uses every single minute of its runtime to its advantage, and every detail is important. If I were to remove, say, the 4th episode, the entire thing would be ruined. If I took out any scene, one of the plot lines would be destroyed. And thusly, when I consider why I love Baccano, I don't think only of all the great moments in the series, but the entire whole of the series. The only other show I've seen with this quality is Serial Experiments Lain, though I'm sure some would debate the trueness of that statement with me. Heh. I also think that the original Boogie Pop novel carries this quality, though that's escaping the realm of anime. I can't help but love to see this perfection in anime, though it could also just be because the two I've found are my kind of show, LOL. But all in love, I'd like to see more anime like this that don't waste a single ounce of time. If anyone knows anything else like this, please tell me. So yeah, this is, I guess, a mildly interesting observation that there's shows. I mean, this is kind of what I later would talk about in the vlog, Perfection Isn't Interesting, that you can make something perfect, but that doesn't mean it's the best or that it's going to be my favorite, you know? Like, something having flaws doesn't necessarily put it below something that is flawless if the flawless thing doesn't have as much good in it as the brilliant thing as I'm describing here. So, you know, like, as I explain in that vlog, like, I compare Furiko, which is a 3-minute short that's absolutely perfect, but just not that interesting in comparison to, like, Gurren Lagann, you know? So yeah, I've made this point again and again over the years, but the way it's explained here, this is fine, aside from all the, like, SMS facial expressions and just, it's so unclear. It feels like I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to say, as opposed to that I already know what I'm about to say and I'm talking about it. Like, there's something about this that feels wishy-washy, and like I'm undecided about whether this is actually a good idea to talk about or something. Alright, so I escaped from 2007, now we're moving into 2008, and this was a period where I first started to experiment with trying to actually write more detailed, fully realized reviews. So you saw how most of my reviews were like just basically reactions, and how I would just go on and on about my own feelings. This is more where I started looking at like what other anime reviewers were doing and like trying to make an interesting review of a show. So really early into 2008, I started like this was like a period where I notched up the quality of my writing considerably. So let's see what it looks like now. I have to say, Escaflowne ended up being a pretty big disappointment in my opinion. At first I was really enjoying it. The sort of blend between shoujo and shonen goodies was neat, but more importantly, it was very fast-paced and the action scenes kicked ass. There was a great sense of adventures, with the way the crew traveled about very quickly, and the world it takes place in seemed very broad. All of the characters, while not particularly deep, were likable as well. Then somewhere around halfway through, the show just fucked up. There was a point of unequivocal awesome right around the halfway point. Both Van and Dillendow were going through turmoil and everything really seemed to be escalating to the next level. But then in the late teens, the pacing just got totally out of whack. I guess it was because plot development was becoming more important, but it lost a lot of the energy it had, and there were certain parts, episode 18, that were plain horrible. But the worst part was wondering where the fuck was Dillendow. Dillendow is my favorite character. He was half the fun of the show, and around for 7 episodes, he wasn't even shown. So around early 20s, God, I'm having difficulty reading this because like the grammar's weird and ugh. So around the early 20s, things start to pick up again, but you don't get that solid climactic feeling. In the beginning, it had always felt like an adventure that was on its way toward a foreseeable goal. But at this point, everyone was just kind of running around in their own agenda with some ambiguous plan towards what they were going to do at the end. But the series made one absolutely huge epic fail mistake at one point, making me hate almost all of the characters. Hitomi turns into a spiteful bitch who, until the very end of the goddamn series, doesn't learn the important message from episode 17. Alan, after being tricked into falling in love with Hitomi, never reverts to his cool, suave self and instead becomes a permanent dickhole throughout the show. Van I didn't hate, but I really never felt anything much towards Van. He was entirely a one-track mind from start to finish, which made him cool and honorable for the first half, like Tony Jaa in The Protector. But at some point, he seemed to be incredibly thick-headed, having to relearn the same peace message over and over. The best side character, Milerna's fiancé, got almost no showtime, and Van's brother was pretty cool, though he doesn't get to be prominent until the end, and then only for a couple episodes. The defining moment of my hatred for the characters, though, was when Dillendow triumphantly returns with the fucking awesome Jajuba, or whatever the hell his name was. When these guys were fighting Alan and Van during the reunion, I was begging for him to kill Alan, and you know there's something wrong when you want the bad guys to win. Of course, had he in fact killed Alan, we wouldn't have gotten the dramatic irony of ZOMG Dillendow as Alan's sister. Oddly enough, I thought that part was really cool. Whether freaky guy or fucked up girl, Dillendow is always a sexy beast, so I don't care. However, I thought that plot element could have been introduced in any number of better ways. It definitely should not have been thrown out there for the last couple of episodes. It's almost like when we last saw Dillendow and the bad guys said some random foreshadowing things about him, it still hadn't been decided what was going to happen to him. Some more things I didn't like. Not one of the battles that took place after Dillendow's initial disappearance were as good as any beforehand. I was in awe of the creativity and intriguing styles of mech fight used early on, but later it just becomes your average hack-and-slash sword fighting. And oh dear god, the final battle was lame. Why? Because Dillendow, who had always been an even match for Escaflowne, gets all of his limbs severed immediately, only to be saved by Jakajubi and Alan. And I honestly didn't care much about Van versus Alan, because the only real reason I even remotely wanted Alan to live was so that I wouldn't have to see Selena/Dilly sad. In addition, the romance between Hitomi and Van was way too rushed. I had always thought it was interesting how the male and female leads didn't begin romantically interested, but were building a bond of trust, and I could sense that they would eventually hook up, but why did it happen in the last 3 episodes and all at once? In any event, at the very least, the ending was pretty good. It would have been much better if the Hitomi x Van pairing had been stronger, but judging the ending individually, it was pretty well done. Overall, I wouldn't call it a bad show, but I would definitely say that it really threw itself off a building at some point. Once the adventure was gone, the fights got lame, and everyone became a bastard. There wasn't much left to end it before you had time to hate it too much. Blah. I don't know why there's this line here. Oh, I guess maybe I edited this in. Since someone said I was being too picky and that keeping the show on one track would have made it less epic, I replied, the whole trouble is that it was epic and then it became non-epic and then rushed to try to be epic again. For instance, it looks like things are getting heated up when the cat girls are around, and then when they die, it's like the entire Zyback force just decides to dope around. Yeah, whatever. This is very specific. So the thing about this, so now we're getting into, this is still basically just my reactions, but at least I'm applying it to the show. I'm trying to explain what this show has done right and wrong in my eyes. But it's all very much like loose terminology that doesn't really tell you much. Like, I'm saying, yeah, the pacing fell apart, but how? In what way? there's not much for me to give you the tools to understand where I'm coming from. If you don't feel the same way I do, then you can just hear me say any of these phrases and just go, no, I didn't feel that way, you know? What do you mean the pacing sucked? What do you mean Alan was unlikable? What do you mean this or that? You know, I don't really explain why I feel these ways, and there's some of it's better than others. Not all of this is like terrible or anything. It just doesn't have much depth, and I don't feel like it's helpful for the audience. Obviously, the grammar and spelling could use some fucking work, but this is a big step up from what we've been seeing so far. At least I think so. Here's another example of kind of the same thing, and whereas Escaflowne, I shouldn't have probably picked that post because of the fact that I have not covered Escaflowne again, you might know that I have covered Technolize again, and you've probably seen my video, The Crushing Nihilistic Depression of Technolize, where I explain in detail what's interesting about the show. Now, that post I wrote has its origins in this post from 2008, the first time I watched the show, so here's what I said about it back then. Technolize was one of the most intense and disturbing experiences of my anime life. I think it could best be described as a super collision between Takashi Miike's Dead or Alive and Serial Experiments Lain. Well, to a far lesser extent, but whatever. It was all around an experience I won't soon forget, though the type I couldn't easily describe or offer up an opinion on. Oh, and it has like 0 rewatch value as well, haha. Simply put, it was really good for the same reasons Dead or Alive was really good. Well, that's real fucking helpful. Both are films, or one is a series, that pace themselves as they see fit. That doesn't tell me what, I don't know what that means, and create an atmosphere unlike anything else, but don't try to be completely different from everything else. Okay, that's the most contrived sentence of all time. Yes, that's in the script. Basically, both of them simply are what they are, not like Ergo Proxy, which tried to be more than it is, and what they are happen to be a fucking trip and a half. I'm a rather big fan of gore and darkness in my shows depending on its portrayal. I can't stand when the gore takes on a sadistic nature, unless it's gleefully sadistic like Baccano or Nemosine. It's better for the gore to simply be a part of the story as it was in text. The only thing that I found to go over the edge was a scene at the very, very end that I won't spoil but made me want to cry. However, I'm not going to hold it against the show for that. And I guess that's all I have to say. Like I said, it's a hard show to describe. I managed to like it quite a bit though. Like Dead or Alive, it won't be one of my favorites just because of the way it is, but I respect it as an excellent piece of work. Also, it's interesting how they pulled off a surprising level of development with Ichisei, even though he had like 10 lines in the first 18 episodes of the series or so. Lol. So yeah, this is just a case, and I think this is something that a lot of reviewers fall into this trap early on and possibly throughout their entire career, which is just feeling the need to talk about everything you've seen, even if you have nothing to say about it, or you just don't know how to talk about it. Like, I clearly should not have written about Technolize because I had nothing to say about Technolize other than that it's really trippy and I don't know how to talk about it, you know? 8 years later, or however long it took, when I made the video about it, I found the words to talk about it. I understood what I was watching because I went through it and really thought about it and considered why did it make me feel the ways that it made me feel, as opposed to just saying that it made me feel some type of way and then not explaining myself. So, yeah. By the way, I realized that this is just turning into me ragging on my old self, but, you know, it is what it is. Alright, so here we're going to get to another post. This is probably the post I've rewritten the most times in my life in terms of, like, writing about this exact same subject matter over and over again. I'm pretty sure I did it just recently. Wasn't I talking about character chemistry recently or something? I don't remember. But yeah, this is It Builds Character, or Depth versus Chemistry in the Tournament of Themes, Part 1. Since I am really terrible at being concise, getting to the point, or phrasing things in a way that sentences lead into each other and the connection between topics is easier, I'm going to try a bunch of random experimental techniques to help this post make sense, since I've given it way too much thought to blow it on grammar, XD. Depth versus Chemistry, why I'd take Aria over 12 Kingdoms any day. When you've been absorbing stories for a long time, eventually everything starts to be a repeat of something you've seen before. For instance, it is extremely rare to find a sci-fi or high fantasy with a truly distinct plot, which is part of what draws me away from the two genres. However, these days many shows distinguish themselves not by striving for a unique plot, but by enhancing the other facets of the show, such as visual, sound, or characters. When it comes to my favorite list, there are only a few shows that I actually like for the story, and even then they tend to have other things which make them great, such as Arjuna and Lane, which both have a great story as well as amazing music, unique visuals, and in Lane's case, great characters. While sound and visuals are great and all, it's pretty much universally accepted that great characters can make a great show. In fact, the entire genre of slice of life is stationed around that idea. However, different people have different ideas of what makes a character great. What you'll hear from most of them are the words depth and development. Character depth is usually accounted for in the strength of their backstory, the range of their emotions, and the variety of their reactions. For example, you would probably consider Asuka Langley Soryu of Neon Genesis Evangelion a deep character. She has very complex emotions, a fluctuating mental state, a traumatic story that gives reasons to her actions, and different things put her in different moods. Her mood is progressive, too, because the stronger her connection with other characters, the stronger her reaction. However, one would not consider fellow Sun monster Louise from Zero no Tsukayama to be deep. She acts totally on shallow emotions and reacts the same way to different situations, regardless of the progress of her relationship. As for development, it is considered to be the changes in a character over the period of the show. What's good about this kind of character attribute is that the character appears to grow and learn like a real person. Their opinions on life or the state of being may evolve and advance based on what life throws at them. They might develop for better or worse, or for example, like Ayato from Razafan, they could constantly be thrown in different directions by the various plot twists and changes in circumstances which surround them. An example of bad character development would be Light Yagami from Death Note, who, in spite of all the plot twists and circumstances, keeps the same beliefs and goals all the way through the years. Seriously, he could have at least fucking warmed up to his wife at least or something, douche. However, what many people tend to leave out of their definition of good characters is chemistry. Be it between two characters or the whole cast, having good chemistry between them can make the entire show enjoyable, regardless of depth of development. As a matter of fact, I consider it to be the most important aspect of a show's characters. I don't know what I'm basing that on. In many cases, a show with brilliant character development and depth can fall flat on its face without the chemistry to hold everything together. The best and likely most controversial example of this is the show whose fans' pride resides in the incredible development of its main characters, 12 Kingdoms. Please don't give me that menacing look while holding that pitchfork. As you may know, the main character in 12K starts off as a total pussy, and after going through some rough shit, starts to get a handle on things and very quickly comes into her own. I admit I was impressed within the 13 episodes I watched at how much she changed and grew in that period. However, I was also bored as hell. The trouble with 12K is that it's a mess at most times the main character is more or less on her own, and the various people she encounters, whether friend or foe, aren't close to her. Even other characters who were deep or developing felt like they were on the side in their own story, which happened to collide or go along with hers at times. In fact, the one black-haired girl seems to be intent on assuring us of this. For some people, that kind of story might be perfectly fine, but it bores the hell out of me. On the flip side, good chemistry can abolish the need for depth or development. Hidamari's sketch is definitely my favorite example of this. Yuno, Sai, and Hiro are definitely not the most unique characters around, Mia exempt because she is unique and made of wind, and don't exactly have the most multifaceted personalities. Yunochi is the classic shy, short-haired girl, Sai is the tomboyish and easily embarrassed type, and Hiro is the motherly, kind type. However, they all work so well together that you can easily get past all of that. What's more, the four girls are like family. Their interactions feel totally natural, and you can easily see how each of them feel about each other. Well, you might overestimate it if you're me. It's not like you can't have it both ways, though. Occasionally, a truly great show manages to pull off great chemistry between deep characters who develop with the story. My most recent sight, and perhaps one of the best examples of this case, is with the spectacular Red Garden. Each character has complex emotions, goes through many changes, and as the show progresses, their bond grows along with them. Red Garden even creates chemistry between its minor characters by involving lots of casual conversations between people on the side, such as the agents discussing everyday life while talking to the girls, or Hervé and his cousin acting as two who know each other would be expected to act. It is able to accomplish this by using the plot only as a medium to drive the characters into their various situations rather than the center of the story. This sort of chemistry doesn't have to be so wide scale either. Welcome to the NHK has characters who are deep and developed, but also showcases some brilliant chemistry between Sato and Yamazaki. Martial Successor Tedesco is another excellent and popular example of this. Yeah. And well, this has gotten to be pretty long, and I'd rather the next part be notably separated, so I'll continue in part 2, Casual versus Dramatic, or the Relationship Chart of Pain, which I'm not even going to read that one. So, this, I think, is the best post of my early career, and it's the closest to the writing style I have now. This is presenting an idea using a bunch of examples, clearly explaining why the examples make me feel that way, what the show is doing to create this sensation. I'm not going into tons of depth here, but at least I'm presenting this concept in a thorough enough way that you can get it and, like, you can take this in and apply it to other things, which is why I've rewritten this post so many times over the years, that I've repeatedly gone back to this premise and made videos about it. But this post in particular, I mean, its biggest problems are that it's just, the grammar is just not great, as always with these old posts. The sentence structures are weird. Just the way I lead you through the point is a little odd. At the end there, I brought in way too many examples. That was totally unnecessary. Like, I made the point with the Red Garden one. I don't know why I had to bring up 5 other shows that I had nothing to say about. There's just a lack of tightness here. You can tell that I'm not that experienced of a writer, but this is generally the structure that I kind of still go for to this day. And I don't think I recognized how good this was. Like, I was really proud of this post, but because it had gotten, like, no comments at the time, like, we've got this Ghost Lightning one that came months later because I probably begged him to leave a comment on it. But no one had commented on this at the time, so I just thought that, this wasn't that good. Like, to me, the only affirmation I ever got is if someone told me that I had written something interesting, and no one told me that about this. So I didn't really learn from this at the time. It was really years later that I would go back to this post and continually revisit it and think of it as, like, this is what I should try to do. Like, I should try to make stuff that's like this. But, it's going to take some getting to get there. By the way, I just wanted to let you know that, like, there's a lot of posts with titles like this, and I just opened them because I wasn't sure what they'd be about. Salivating at the sight of an artist rendering which represents the succulent body of a young attractive female, or occasionally I see fit to post despite a lack of prior decision toward a topic, or I wonder if there's a character limit for the title of my post, edit, I guess not. And then this is a post about how much I like the Arjuna soundtrack and the Kaiji soundtrack, and that's it. That's what this is. All of my post titles are references to Hayate the Combat Butler. Yes, even this one. Okay, so one of the things I'm well known for is research projects, and this was the earliest one I could find of those. This was where I was getting into this period of, like, starting to learn about creators or just looking through anime history and just, like, wanting to know stuff. So my first major fucking research project was, of course, about lollies, lolly porn. It's called Orwell Was Right, 1984 was fucking nuts, or One Giant Fuck You to Lolly Bashers, or Holy fucking shit, this is the best thing I've discovered ever, or Get ready to beat your sorry dick black and blue. Before I begin, a special thanks to Wild Arms Hero for getting me interested, as well as all the people who released this shit, and no thanks whatsoever to my Anime List and Anime News Network who made this a confusing pain in the ass. Today I'd like to tell all of you about a very important discovery that I bet you didn't know a damn thing about. It is the first hentai OVA ever released in 1984. The 6-episode OVA was titled in what may be considered the ultimate I shit you not moment, Lolita anime. You bet your ass it was chock full of delicious tiny-breasted lollies. Finding out about this thing was a pain in the ass because that very same year, following its example, a different company also released an anime called Lolita Anime, which has been alternatively titled Uchiyama Aki. What makes this a pain is that ANN had Lolita Anime and MAL had Uchiyama Aki, and the only other site I found with info about them was half convincing me they were the same show. Okay, so far, my problem with this post is that I'm showing too much of my work, and no one cares. Let's just get to the point. Of course, despite the fact that the shows themselves are rare, there's actually a pretty extensive Wikipedia article for each of them, possibly to clear up that confusion. Naturally, I didn't find those till I'd already spent an hour gathering info in other ways. Okay, nobody cares. Both the Wikipedia article and ANN entry claim that episode 4 of the original Lolita anime is findable online. However, recently episodes 2... See, this is like a boring version of what I did with the difficulties of being right about anime video. Like, that one, I strung it into this narrative where I kind of, like, took you along with me on the journey so you could have this experience of going down the rabbit hole. This is just me, like, bitching for a whole paragraph. I've thus far watched the second and fourth episodes, and man, it's amazing. As far as being lollies goes, the girls seem to be from the Lucky Star school of high school girls who could pass for about 11, all with petite breasts and tiny bodies. Most of the designs are notably 80s, but still fucking hout. As mentioned in the wiki article, some of the characters are meant to resemble popular characters at the time, such as the girl in episode 4 who looks like a lolly version of Eiko. Because the show hasn't been subbed, I can't really say anything about the story except that there was one, as there was the usual talky bits in each episode, but they definitely had a satisfying amount of action in each. The most absolutely awesome thing about watching these, though, is that every hentai since has been blatantly influenced by this original. It really had everything. There was the discolored or sparkling cum shots, the weird motifs like a hose shooting water to represent cum, parts where a dick would randomly be shining or invisible, sex scenes where the background would be some random environment, a part where a girl almost gets raped by an ugly old man, plain old rape, bribe sex, apparent incest, bondage, and of course my absolute favorite, each episode had an obligatory lesbian sex scene. It was fucking glorious. Plus, it was all uncensored. Apparently laws were a little different in the 80s or something because there was actually certain positions which has some kind of censor on them, but others were just fine, I guess. I can't give an explanation for that one. The whole thing is surprisingly good looking and shines with the brilliance of a team who knows how to make something good with a low budget. And believe me, the budget was probably low because there were parts where it would do a little frame by frame thing, or I don't know what that means, or otherwise reuse images. However, they more than made up for the lack of fluidity with the way they moved. Sex scenes were what I would almost like to call realistic. The girls' bodies convulsed and curled and reacted, and the sex scenes were of pretty decent length. It was very hot. Getting away from just the awesomeness of this OVA itself, I was pretty surprised to find out about just how popular lolly was back then. You see, it'd be one thing if, like in today's market, there were tons of hentai and a bunch of them were lolly, but this wasn't the case. While there were being made from 1984 onwards, there really wasn't that many hentai made in the 80s overall, and wouldn't you know it, most were lolly. To give you just an impression of how immense the lolly craze was, though, we take you to the longest hentai ever made, Cream Lemon. This OVA covered all kinds of stories, tons of genres, and by its end, catered to whatever fetish you probably have. Totaling is what it's supposed to say, 40 motherfucking episodes. There are various episodes available online wherever you find them, so naturally I gave the first ep a go. This show has a lot of focus on the story than the predecessor, and more than most hentai I've seen. This one's subbed, by the way. The first episode was about the show's two recurring characters, a brother and sister who are falling in love and naturally fuck. By the episode's end, the sex scene was just like those in Lolita anime, leading me to the impression that they would be similar to that in all the 80s shows, though Cream Lemon has a big-ass lens flare to censor the boy's cock and block out the lolly's snatch, though only when it was open. Needless to say, the girl was super awesome lolly. So there you have it. The 80s, just like today, were all about fucking little girls, so before you go saying that modern anime is full of lollies and shit, look back at the original. I took the liberty of adding Lolita anime to my Mal, so go watch it and add it to your list. Oh, adding it to Mal. I added it to my anime list, like I added the show to the site. So yeah. Okay, my biggest problems with this are that way too much information, way too excited about hot lollies, gross, creepy, and there's a weird lack of explanation of why it's written so vindictively until the very end. Because what I saw this as is that people were always saying that modern anime is full of lolly shit. And so when I discovered that the first ever hentai anime was a lolly thing, then I saw that as a huge fuck you to everyone who had been saying, you know, that anime is all lollies now. Like, anime was always lollies. It was always, like, all over the place. And I've built a better case for that in recent times. If you watch my video, Random Drunk Ass Anime History Episode 2 on cute girls, then I give this history and a whole lot of other stuff. But it's a lot more, like, there's just way more information. I've done way more research than just discovered this whole concept right before writing about it. And also, I'm just way less excited to rant about lollies having sex. Yeah, I was a pervert back in the day. Fuck Nanoha. This is where I first got into writing about shows that I really hate. So let's check it out. I just felt like I really needed to get this out there because I have suffered a grave injustice and I need to fucking expound. Get your fuck counters ready because this is going to be a rampage. So, fucking Nanoha. Magical Girl Lyrical Motherfucking Nanoha. It's hard to have been into anime over the last year and not at least hear about it. The fucking Japanese otaku eat this shit up. At least I'd guess so with all the fucking characters in last year's Saimoe and the utter fucking dominance of posters and magazines. More than likely, if you ask people about the 3 seasons of Nanoha, they will give you the same reply. The first season is good, the second season is great, and the third season totally fucking sucks ass. The Bigen likes all 3 seasons, and apparently the Japanese do too, with all this fucking fan work coming down in raging waterfalls. It's not enough that there's some good word out there and a lot of popularity. Even one of my most trusted sources recommended the show, saying that it had little girls pulling off attacks that would make DBZ characters shit themselves. Perhaps the biggest driving factor for me to watch, though, was the apparent fake lesbian love between Nanoha and some bitch named Fate because they, conceived a fucking child or some shit. I don't fucking give a damn. Some of the doujins are nice. End of story. This culmination is more than enough for me to give a try. Less importantly, the first season was also directed by Akiyuki Shinbo. Even though he's my favorite director, it doesn't matter this time because he was giving zero fucking creative freedom whatsoever. Well, that's an interesting way of phrasing it. Besides some serious lolly fan service, it's impossible to tell that this is a Shinbo show at all. So anyways, I actually watched the first 2 episodes of this way back. We're talking fucking September when I had just learned how to download things. Back then I didn't even hear voice actors. I was hearing a voice in my head as I tried to read subtitles fast enough. I didn't really know what to expect from the show, and I didn't really pay it much mind. It was nothing offensive, but not interesting enough to drive me to continue. I vaguely remember what happened in the first 2 episodes. God, I don't fucking care. Today, however, my hand was literally forced. My brother and his friend were hogging both computers to play WoW on their newly discovered server, and me, being nice for once, opted to go watch some DVDs. However, I didn't feel in the mood for any of my DVDs, so I opted for Datadisc and PS3 instead. Of course, the first 3 shows I tried had invalid file formats, so I was left with no choice but to give Nanoha another chance. I've been interested in doing so anyway, so I didn't see it was blah blah blah. This is the most fucking trite bullshit I've ever had the displeasure of completing an episode of. Had I not been unable to access my computer, I couldn't have made it past the fucking 15-minute mark. This was my time in purgatory, and I had to watch the whole goddamn episode. The place to start with why this show sucks so fucking bad is very easy. Nanoha's voice. Jesus fucking shit. Like fucking ice picks to the fucking ears. She's voiced by Yukari Tamura, who has a lot of range and is therefore rarely annoying, but holy shit did she manage to grate in this motherfucker. Every single line of dialogue literally caused physical fucking pain to my balls. I felt them shrieking and shriveling up with each pang of misery at her horrendous enunciations and freakish gasps for breath. I'm tempted to find a fucking doujin of Nanoha getting raped in the mouth just to have the fucking illusion of her voice being completely fucking destroyed. Jesus Christ! Oh my god! Oh my Jesus fuck. Secondly, the character designs. At least the bodies aren't a problem. Good old lolly shit with the kind of fan service that makes it obvious who this show is really meant for. However, I cannot stress this enough as it applies to a number of anime. I could not stand the fucking hair. Every fucking character in every fucking shot had this fucking swell of hair going upward on the left or right side of their head, depending on which way they were facing. It makes too fucking sense. When you see them from the front, they don't have fucking hair swells on each side. It's only from the side. It's like they don't know how to draw hair so that it fits around the face, so they just have this fucking big-ass swell to make it look like the hair fits. I can't fucking do this anymore. It's just me saying fuck as many times as I possibly can. This was literally the first episode. That was all about the first episode. God, the levels of edge. It was a different time. So here's how I used to write posts about information. Studios you assholes should be aware of, Part 1, Gainax. This was later renamed to Studio Studies in the next post. Since everyone seems to be saying how they don't pay much attention to studios and stuff, or that studios don't matter, I thought I'd go through a few of them with you. You've probably heard of some of them, but we'll stress their importance anyways. Gainax, yes, we're starting with the obvious. Okay, remember, last time we talked about Gainax on this blog, it was in the context of I had just looked at their Wikipedia article and found out that they were a studio who had done a lot of good shows. Now we've reached the point 1 year later where Gainax is starting with the obvious. This is a case of, as I learned more about anime, I just kind of kept assuming everyone was learning as much as I was. Like we're basically all on the same page, but I'm just bringing things to light, a little bit more. I don't know, it's weird. Like, if Gainax is so obvious, then why is this even necessary? Whatever. Gainax was formed by 6 university students. Hideaki Anno, who directed all the early work, which is not entirely true. Yoshiyuki Sadamoto, character designer for most of the shows. Yes, that means he is why Rei is so hot. Tamaki Akai, the one who called 2 Channel an anus and then left Gainax. Toshio Okada, the original president of Gainax and original Ota King. He recently renounced this title because, like every other 80s obsessed douchebag, he got fed up with Moe. God, the vindictiveness. Shinji Higuchi did storyboards, a ton of shit on Eva, like writing, storyboarding, and assistant directing, and Shinji Ikari was named after him. He's more important than that made him sound. And Yasuhiro Takeda, on whom I can find little information other than that he's a producer. Gainax may not be the biggest or most wealthy studio around, but they are easily the most famous and infamous. Gainax has faced no shortage of controversy over the years, which is kind of a given because they made Neon Genesis Evangelion, which may as well have been called insert controversy here. Many of my blog's readers may remember last year's controversy involving Japan's Megaforum 2 channel. After Gurren Lagann episode 4, which I think was a great stylistic decision, people on 2 channel bitched about the animation, and Tamaki Akai bitched back, which pretty much cost him his job because 2 channel has some kind of hold on the anime industry in Japan, apparently. I don't know if that's true at all. Gainax started as Daikon Productions, and their first 2 animated shorts were Daikon 3 and Daikon 4. Daikon 3 is a short, like 2 minutes, kind of cute, kind of fun video about a lolly with superpowers fighting so she can water a radish. It's not something that's very memorable, which is where Daikon 4 comes in. This 4-minute video has the little girl transforming into a magical girl in a bunny costume who fights her way through every pop culture reference imaginable, and then literally the direct precursor to End of Evangelion happens. You know that scene with all the crosses and all the blood covering the earth? It's almost the same fucking shot. Daikon Productions became Gainax in 1985. The first full-length production by Gainax was The Wings of... Again, this is so weirdly assumptive that you just, like, you already know half the shit I'm talking about. The first full-length production by Gainax was The Wings of Honeymise, a movie commonly considered a classic that I haven't seen yet. This would remain true until this year, but, you know, maybe if I'm gonna write a thing about this studio's history, maybe I should watch their first fucking movie! Their next work was Hideaki Anno's first ever directing job, the seminal classic Top Onerai Gunbuster, which solidified them as a production force to be reckoned with. The Gunbuster OVAs feature incredible artwork, memorable scenes and characters, and brilliant fusions of both the real robot and super robot genres, as well as shonen and shoujo styles. The OVA features over-the-top imagery and ganbare attitude that would be seen in Gainax works to come. Anno's directing style is also made evident with things like an entire episode in black and white and his frequent use of text and nameplates for emphasis, especially with dates, an important concept in Gunbuster. In 1990, Gainax began their first series with Anno directing again. Nadia: The Secret of Blue Water is not quite an adaptation of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but is heavily inspired by it and other Jules Verne works. The show is very childish and adventurous with a very family-friendly vibe. Most notably, the show features some fun and cool characters, namely Nadia, a headstrong young female. Blah, 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 I don't care. This is just kind of boring. Go watch it before I kill you, I say, of End of Evangelion. Yeah, how am I gonna fucking do that? So, anyway, yeah, I just kind of go through the studio's entire history and just, like, say, yeah, they made this, and they made this, and that one's cool, and that one's like this, and who gives a fuck? This is the problem with a lot of my older research projects, is that, and this went up even into my video days, is that I had a real difficulty with creating a narrative out of it. Because just the raw information itself is really only interesting to the kind of people who are probably going to look it up themselves anyways. Like, just knowing that the same guy made this and also made this is not particularly interesting to most people. And I didn't really understand that back even when I did my video tracing the lineage of Cowboy Bebop. Like, the video's 15 minutes of just me, like, naming people and what they did, but there's no sense of what they did. Like, you literally hear the names of shows, but, like, what do they bring to the table? What about them makes the show cool? And so that's something I've been, that I've learned to do in more recent times, is to try to craft a narrative out of this, as opposed to just literally listing off information. And you can really see me trying to craft that narrative in the Shinbo videos, especially the third one, Akiyuki Shinbo in the 2000s. That's where I really, like, stripped back the technical details and made it more about trying to tell a story about this creator. Okay, I happen to be looking at Best of Digital Boys anime blogging, and the first one is that Manabi Straight post I read at the start of this video, a post detailing how important the endings of Hitohiro and Manabi Straight were to me and comparing them. My first time being really proud of a post. So, And the Gynax theory, good is good. I came to terms with the fact that studio does matter. I didn't even remember that I had this conflict. Perfection versus brilliance. Interesting outlook with a question mark. Yeah, okay. Depth versus chemistry. This is also probably my first part that I was really, really proud of, but that got 0 comments. 'Twas depressing. So again, we see me saying how even though I recognize that this was a good post, the fact that it got no comments made me not really pay attention to it in the future. And then the Orwell was right one. Possibly my favorite post is it was my biggest research accomplishment. So yeah, that was my biggest research accomplishment at the time. Okay, now we've got the predecessor to How to Recognize a Great Anime in Just One Episode. Fanboy Genocide Part 1, the first episode of Haruhi. You all had to know this would happen eventually. After watching me get pissed at various kinds of fans, you must have figured eventually I'd start singling them out for the slaughter. So while these posts will only happen every once in a while, this is a series called Fanboy Genocide, dedicated to groups with opinions that have significantly pissed me off on forums and chats, and hopefully correcting their ways. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm sure this was like at least partly ironic, but it's still hilarious. So I've pretty much got no more bitching to do about people who hate Haruhi and Luzki Star, because they all fall into a couple of groups. The first is a group of those who should never have watched the shows in the first place and only ended up doing so thanks to the rampant popularity. The second group is trolls. However, one commonly expressed notion from people who loved Haruhi as a whole is a complaint that the first episode is stupid, boring, poorly made, pointless, etc. Well, congratulations, enough of you have bitched about it, and now I have to kill you all. No, not literally. The part about it that bothers me the most is that these people do like the rest of the series. Haruhi as a whole has a good amount of quite blatant parody. One of the show's strong points is molding together all these cliche plots and putting a twist on them to seem like the show itself is realistic and believable in contrast to its own unbelievable elements. It's most evident in the characters, an alien, an esper, and a time traveler, classic of sci-fi stories and moe anime alike. There is the silent girl and the clumsy girl in the tsundere, and even the yaoi bait and lolly. It takes on the ever-popular mystery genres, epic space battles, philosophical, sci-fi, good old school comedy. There's a little bit of it all in the mix. Half the fun in Haruhi is just how it puts its own twist on everything relating to anime culture. So then we have the first episode, a blatant parody of the magical girl genre with a sci-fi overtone and some rom-com stylings. Haruhi's movie brilliantly rips on all sorts of anime cliche, with Kyon really pour salt into the wound with his crushing monologue. I feel like I was watching every single silly anime I'd ever seen thrown together and cranked up to 11. The episode does the great job of introducing us to different characteristics of all the characters before we've even met them. Yuki is stoic throughout, Koizumi has to move constantly to use his hands to talk, Mikuru constantly looks like she's having a heart attack, and we get to hear Kyon's hilarious monologue against it all. This just gets more fun when rewatching it, knowing all of the characters and seeing all the things we know and love about them. But way more than all of that, the episode is directed and animated so incredibly well that I would have loved to see a show just made of these silly films. I could almost call the episode a masterpiece. Characters accidentally show up on screen holding the cue cards for others, and we watch Mikuru's eyes as she blatantly reads off of them. When Yuki, the villain, is supposed to disappear, we see her just walking infinitely down the road. The camera pans up to the sky constantly. Someone gets injured when they try to use firecrackers for special effects. The camera abruptly cuts from Mikuru's undressing session. When Yuki's cat accidentally talks, she hits it on the head and just says, "That was ventriloquism." After the bad guys are knocked into the water, we still see them. The special effects are ass-drawn thunderbolts from Microsoft Paint. The camera even goes in and out of focus during action scenes. Even the voice actors manage to play a character who can't act. Every single thing that could possibly be done wrong in the making of a short film goes wrong to the point that you have to remind yourself, this is anime. The effort put into perfectly replicating how a shitty live-action movie would look is astounding and makes for one of the most constantly hilarious and impressive episodes of anime ever. It just gets better and better the more you watch it, too. If you didn't like the first episode of Haruhi, you must have either missed the joke, misunderstood the show, or have no fucking idea what good animation is. I still can't believe some people thought this episode was poorly animated. Did they only ever see the obviously joke laser beams and miss all of the ungodly fluidity? It's easily one of the greatest first episodes of anime ever, and certainly among the most memorable. Your thoughts? So yeah, this actually, in spite of the weird vitriolic stance on all of it, is me kind of starting to go in a more analytical direction, and it's inspired by a lot of what inspires a lot of my writing, which is vindictiveness and being mad about the way people are talking about something. You've probably noticed that a significant portion of my videos are born out of me being mad that everyone's talking about something wrong and me trying to correct it. So this is where it happened before, and then I restated like almost this entire point in my video about great first episodes of anime. So in this case, I would say that it doesn't go into enough detail in areas and maybe too much detail in others. I don't think we needed this like gigantic list of every single thing that was noteworthy in the episode. Just needs to be tightened up a little, and the intro and outro segments are just like way too bitter. I also have to go on and on about how it's easily one of the greatest episodes ever made, because back then I was like way into hyperbole. But yeah, we're starting to move in a better direction. Alright, here we have the original version of my Great Scenes in Anime series, which I think only has like 1 or 2 episodes so far. But anyways, my original anime moment of the week, Hajime no Ippo, Rocky's Overdrive. Funeral and No Name were marathoning Hajime no Ippo for the past few days. I popped in randomly, catching about 8 episodes between episode 20 and 40 or so. Hajime no Ippo is an instantly lovable show, chock full of great moments and memorable fights. Naturally, in true shonen spirit, every fight has revelations for the characters and epic moments of glory. I like to mention the most powerful among those I saw. So yeah, that first couple of sentences did not need to be there. In this episode, Ippo is in the middle of a fierce fight against Sido, a man known as Rocky to the adoring fans of his hometown. Before the fight, we have learned that Sido uses the same fighting style as Ippo, which is to get in close and deliver powerful blows. In contrast to the previous person Ippo fought, Sido is a great guy, fighting so that he can be nice, buy nice things for the underprivileged children of his hometown. He likes fighting and has been itching to take on Ippo. It should also be noted that he looks exactly like Kazuma from S-Kaed. No, it shouldn't. There's no reason to note that. That should not be noted. The fight starts off furiously, and both fighters take blow after blow of each other's quick, powerful shots. Sido is notably more powerful than Ippo, and the match seems to be in his favor for a good while. Ippo had at this point not yet lost to an opponent, and Sido was definitely worthy, so I thought this may be about time for Ippo to finally lose. The intense fight rages on and on until both fighters are weak. Ippo summons all of his strength and delivers an incredible blow to Sido's temple. There's a moment of silence before Sido, seemingly unaffected by the hit, starts beating the living shit out of Ippo. He gets Ippo up against the rope and just keeps wailing on him. The bell sounds, but no one hears it, and the beatdown continues. Finally, the referee hears the bell and pulls Sido away. Both fighters return to their corners. Back in his corner, Ippo isn't sure if he can keep fighting after his powerful blow has no effect. His coach thinks they may have to throw in the towel. However, that's when the match ends. As it would turn out, Sido had already long since fallen unconscious. After the blow to the temple, Sido had effectively been KO'd, but his body, powered purely by the enthusiasm of his hometown crowds cheering and his total dedication, had continued to fight on. There's confusion among the crowd, and even Ippo can barely believe that he's really won when he's just gotten beaten so badly. The referee announces Sido's unconsciousness. It sinks into the crowd that their cheers had driven him to fight on beyond defeat. Moved by the spirit of their name, the crowd cheers Rocky, Rocky, and you will always be our Rocky as he is carried away on a stretcher. The scene was moving in how the crowd and Sido could inspire one another so much, and Sido's sheer spirit that drove him ever onward. He definitely deserves the respect of his fans, and they, with so much spirit, deserve a fighter as great as him. So this post, the problem really is that I'm just describing a great scene from the show, and I haven't really explained anything that you wouldn't get out of watching the scene yourself. I could have just said, go watch Hajime no Ippo episode 30, and then this is the only part that's not just me actually describing the show, is just like a sentence about why I think it's cool that this happened. So this is totally pointless. And this is why it took me a really long time to start making my Great Moments in Anime series, because it was really hard for me to find moments that I actually could analyze, the only reason that you should write about a great moment in a show is that it's not obvious. It's not self-evident why it's great. I could talk about why the ending of Gurren Lagann is great, but that is completely obvious because it's over the top and epic, and the animation is incredible, and it's the culmination of the story. Anybody could figure that out. So I don't think there's anything about this scene that you couldn't figure out what's great about it by literally watching it. I just stopped on this and thought it was funny. Tiring of this BS. It's been said many times by lovely Kitsune, and I'll be repeating it. People need to learn that their favorite anime has flaws, and they need to recognize them. I'm sick and tired of this bullshit where anyone can run a show into the ground with reasons they hate it, but when you attack a show they like, it's fucking flawless. People need to recognize the flaws in their favorite shows before they go pointing out the flaws in others. I've seen it a million times where people treat you like an idiot for thinking a show is flawed, but having nothing to back up their claims that the show is good. It's always some bullshit like reason like X character is great or the show is just awesome, you don't understand. Fuck that shit. Fucking realize that what you think is good is not the same as what is good. It's up to the individual, not to you, and if you have the gall to bash on other shows, you better have some fucking good ass reasons to call yours good or be willing to admit to its flaws. What happened to make me so mad? I don't even remember a scenario like that. Oh man, I don't like where this one's going. Opinions versus absolutes in anime reviews. The word good gets thrown around a lot in anime discussion, and in conjoint with various aspects of what most consider to matter in an anime. Good animation or good characters or good directing. Good is always taken to have an objective meaning. I won't get too deep into that though, since I'm sure I have too many times on this blog. However, some of these things are totally up to opinion, while others aren't. I'd like to explore what things should and shouldn't be personal considerations. I'm going to do this as a list where each category is either or opinion or absolute. Story, opinion. Probably the worst thing to objectify is the story. Stories aren't meant to appeal to everyone, or else we'd never get any damn variety. Just because you think a story about a girl who transforms from cans is stupid doesn't mean the next guy thinks it's anything less than total fuckwin. I used the word fuckwin a lot back then. There's really no way at all to objectify a plot. Even if the plot is confusing or makes no sense, there are people who like it that way, as can be seen in shows like Serial Experiments Lain being popular. Even a lack of story or a story that has been used before is not a bad thing. I was rather pissed earlier when I saw all the Mal reviews bitching that Godanner was all fighting and little plot, when that just means it's aimed at an audience who likes those things. 2. Animation. Absolute. A lot of people get confused about what animation means. It does not mean art. A show can have great art and shitty animation. See Gilgamesh. Animation quality is generally defined by 2 things: fluidity/frame rate and sensibility. I don't think frame rate is necessarily. Fluidity was fine. And sensibility. I don't know what that means. Pretty much goes as follows. If the movement looks clean and the show isn't just a bunch of pans, still images, and talking heads, then it's got good fluidity. If the backgrounds are structurally correct and angular shots look right, there's good sensibility. Okay. Toradora is a show with excellent animation because there's a lot of movement with characters always staying on model, lots of angular shots done well, and tons of beautiful lighting effects. Fate Stay Night is a show with unbearably shitty animation. It's got problems in both departments. This is the original Fate Stay Night, by the way. But the real meat of the issue is a lack of sensibility. Backgrounds are drawn in structurally absurd ways. Why are both floors of the house angled in different directions? And characters move poorly in relation to the background. There's links there to videos showcasing what I'm talking about. Art, including character design. Opinion. This is pretty obvious. Pretty means something different to different people. You can see this especially in hentai, where character designs are directly proportional to enjoyment, and everyone has their own taste. Anyway, directing, including style. Absolute. Okay, interesting standpoint. Once again, this is something that is pretty clearly defined. A director's job is to make sure everything comes out correctly. They have to make sure they've got a good-looking shot, that it flows well with the other shots before and afterwards, and that all the other elements are constructed correctly to make the scene. Sounds like I'm describing editing there, did you, bro? Or should I say 2009 Digital Boy? Directors have a lot of input into what makes the show good, though they are often given too much credit by people who don't seem to understand what it is they do exactly. Directors like Satoshi Kon and Hayao Miyazaki are special because they actually do other jobs like writing and artwork on the films, as do other directors. I don't know. I clearly don't know what the fuck I'm talking about here. Oh, this goes on a lot longer than I thought it would. Oh my god, this goes on for a while. Alright, well, this is retarded. So, that's all I have to say about that. This is just a case of, as often happens, someone who doesn't know what they're talking about trying to systematize how we talk about stuff. Shame. Defining my fandom. What I like more than anyone else. Or, oh my god, it's the return of the Hayate titles. Or, hey guys, what if I finally decided to one-up my former longest post title? You know, that one about Gurren Lagann and stuff, but really had nothing to do with the post? I really liked that post title, so yeah, let's go for that. Though it's going to lay waste to my comment thingy in the left-hand column, especially if there's like 5 consecutive comments, but whatever, it's worth the repercussion. Or, Digital Boy Gets Indie, the forgotten parts of your lost destiny. Here's a post that got me in a lot of trouble back in the day. Top 20 shows you suck for not seeing. People got mad at me for this one because I was listing off posts that everyone sucks for not seeing, a significant number of which I had not seen or had dropped. And I don't know why I had to write everything so aggressively and like a total dick. Why did I have to write it this way? Why? Okay, this is interesting because this post is called Why Goodness Doesn't Matter. Probably secretly a confused Toradora post. So I'm wondering if this will cover the same ground as the Perfection is an Interesting video. Let's find out. Fandom is a strange thing, and one thing's for sure, goodness does not dictate fandom. As Ghost Lightning always says, fanboys are forgiving, not blind. He supports this idea with his immense love from across Frontier in spite of the many flaws he himself professes it to have. Basically, this post is a rebel cry. Fuck good shows, fanboys arise. I'm not even going to bother with a subjectivity versus objectivity argument. We all know there are good and bad anime out there, even if the lines blur often, but this post has nothing to do with debatable anime. This is a post about anime that is outright above average, anime that are good, and anyone who says otherwise is a troll. Just to be sure we're on the same page, this is anything like Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Honey and Clover, 12 Kingdoms. These are extreme examples. More down to earth might be Mushishi, Revolutionary Girl Utena, or for a more current and relevant example, Toradora. These shows are commonly considered good, above average, and no one really can put up a good argument against them. I don't know what the fuck basis I have for saying that. Until now. Okay, good shows, who the fuck cares? Don't get me wrong, if you love a show and it's a good show and you're excited about it being a good show, more power to you. But there are these people who are obsessed with the show's goodness. Listen and be warned that this is disturbing. There are people who won't like or sometimes even watch a show because they think it is less than good. I sometimes wonder why these people bother watching anime. A show being good doesn't make it likable, and a show being likable doesn't make it good. But in the end, likability is really more important than goodness. Now, goodness can contribute to likability, as I'm sure it does often, but it does not control or define it. But to give you an example of why likability is more important, let's ask ourselves, do we hate Code Geass because it's not as good as Legend of the Galactic Heroes? Legend of Galactic Heroes is good and likable, while Code Geass is likable regardless of goodness. We don't pick our favorites based on goodness. At this point, you must be wondering where I'm going with this. The point is, I'm tired of hearing about how good shows are. Right now, I am tired of hearing people talk about the goodness of Toradora. Omo pretty much got to me on this. He talks in this post about how Toradora is a good show, but who cares? Now, I'm not on his side. I love Toradora, but I too don't really care about how good a show is. Omo is cryptic, so I won't put words in his mouth, but I believe what he's saying is that Toradora is good and all, but he doesn't find it likable. In the future, I want to see more posts and discussions from people about why they like shows and less about why those shows are good or bad. People seem to get stuck on defending or pronouncing the hierarchy of a show and forget to talk about why it's flat out enjoyable. Anime fandom is about just that, fandom. It's not not blind but forgiving. I want to read about what makes you a fan of anime. I actually like this post. It's written terribly, but it feels exactly like a vlog I would do now. Like, I could just redo this as a vlog, except that, you know, some of you have already seen me do so just now. Oh my god, this has been going for an hour and a half. Okay, so I want to read this one because there was a period of time in 2009 and maybe early 2010 where I was doing this series of posts called The Epic Journey. And the idea of it was that I was trying to finally in-depth review all of my favorite anime. And I would say that this got the closest to, like, this is where I kind of developed the analytical style I have now. That I would take these shows and try to, like, really dig into the bones of what was interesting about them, try to explain the show as I understood it, and what about it was good. And so I did this for Eureka 7, where I wrote a post like every 12 episodes or so, like, you know, about why that part of the show was great, reaching the conclusion. I covered FLCL through all 6 episodes. I wrote one post about each episode, and that was like the most proud I ever was of an analysis at the time. The only reason I'm not picking that one is because it's obviously a lot of posts. So I covered a few things this way, and one of them was End of Evangelion. So I want to cover this so we can see how I would try to write something akin to what I would do now with, like, K-On! A Loving Thesis, or my Girlish Number video, or, like, any of those videos where I'm talking about something I really love in depth. This is an early example of that. But I gotta go to the bathroom first. Okay, so End of Evangelion conclusion. Any way the wind blows. A post in The Epic Journey contains massive Evangelion spoilers. Regular readers should know that I am not good with objectivity. I think it's silly to try and grade anything on a giant scale because different people see what makes an anime good as different things. My goal here is not to be objective, but to explain to the world why they might like the end of Evangelion. It's a recommendation and not a definitive ranking. I won't repeat anything I said in the introductory post, but rather add to it with what I've learned from my rewatch. So as you can see there, I'm starting to develop a sense of identity as the anti-objectivity guy, which is still exactly how I am now. So that's interesting. I've finally done it. It took me over 2.5 years and 3 watches, but I've done it. I feel as though everything leading up to this moment just validated itself. My many hours poured into deriving meanings from the Mars Volta lyrics, my research into philosophy, psychology, film, and my addiction to symbolism in art, movies, and everything else. All this time spent watching pretentious anime, seeking a deeper meaning in all that I come into contact with, and always striving to realize the core of the original creator's intent has paid off. People, I can safely say that on this day, upon my 3rd watching, I fully understood every single thing that happened in End of Evangelion. That's a great intro. I actually really like that. All right, so we're 2 years in. We've gone 2 years into my blog. You've seen what my writing style's been like for these first 2 years. There's been this gradual evolution. We started off with just literally describing my reactions to Simone. And then this gradual build-up of starting to get a little bit more reviewy, a little bit more talking about the show and not just about my reaction to it, a little bit more analytical here and there. I'm trying to understand the stuff I'm watching on a deeper level than I have before. I'm trying to get more into it and to really pull these things apart. So, finally, 2009, this is where I start trying to write real analytical reviews. This is where we're going to see the genesis of what I'm doing now. And I did this specifically, these reviews were written to be like my anime list reviews, like how that site kind of breaks things down into categories, but I wanted to take those categories and expand on them and get into everything that could be said about a show. Every single different way that you could look at it or talk about it, I wanted to cover. So that's what we're going to be seeing here. The first time I watched Simone was in early 2007, when I had just gotten back into anime and it was one of my first new shows. I watched it on Crunchyroll, which back then was the shittiest possible quality of streams imaginable. Like all anime I watched that early in my fandom, I lost memory of it quickly because of factors like me not really hearing voice actors, the shittiness of quality, etc. As such, when I later bought and watched the first DVD, I was utterly shocked at how much better it was, and I remembered in about every way. I knew that once I collected all the DVDs, it would quickly be, I don't care. See, none of this needs to be there. And in fact, when I posted this on my anime list, I cut all this out. And the funny thing about it is, I cut all this out because I thought that the My Anime List readers wouldn't care about this because they don't know who I am, but that this was important for the blog, because I guess I thought that the point of the blog was to chronicle everything about my experience. I don't know why I thought the audience would care about that. Simone is one of those anime that is accurately described as amazing, and anyone who disagrees has no taste. It's brilliant, if you will, and that may be why it doesn't have enough fans. It stands a little too far on the threshold of goodness where it can't really become popular. Kind of like Legend of Galactic Heroes or Honey and Clover or something, where it has a following of dedicated fans and is truly top tier stuff, but somehow just never reaches the heights that it should in popularity. Wow. Unlike those two I mentioned, though, Simone has the power of Yuri, and therefore was able to get licensed by Media Blasters, who did the absolute perfect shining example of how a niche release should be. Sub only, 26 episodes on 5 DVDs, plenty of bonus features, and absolutely gorgeous cover art. It's in every way what fans of the series would want, so I can't commend MB highly enough for such a great release. Sound. Because Simone is a bit difficult to be concise in recommending, I'm going to stab at some of the elements of awesome at random. The soundtrack by Toshihiko Sahashi, the Bigo Gunslinger Girl Full Metal Panic, is a non-stop audio orgasm. It's very RPG sounding, and I wouldn't have been surprised to see Uematsu's name rolled through the credits. The soundtrack is kind of like what would happen if you took all the best songs from Final Fantasy 7 and 9. There are some highly funky bass-driven songs, some Latin-sounding guitar-picking songs, some tango, and no shortage of huge bombastic symphony anthems. I'm listening to the OST right now, and it's so exciting that it makes me hit the keys more dramatically. It is actually making this post sound way more epic to me than it should. That's like a very Devu thing to say. Aside from the songs just being epic, though, they are so well paced it's uncanny. Director Junji Nishimura, Ranma 1/2 True Tears Windy Tales, is... See how I'm doing this thing where now I'm trying to, like, you know, name drop all the important people and then say what else they did, and, like, you know... This is good progress, I think. Junji Ito's commentary implies that he had a major part. Junji Nishimura, rather. Commentary implies that he had a major part in deciding how the music should sound and what kind of genres should be included where. There's one particular thematic song that simply makes scenes. Almost all the major scenes in the show feature the song, and every time it adds a whole new layer of awesome to the scene. I remember telling No Name while we were watching it that any scene with this song is automatically going to kick ass. What I found interesting was that a lot of the huge or bombastic scenes would feature lighter music, and some quaint scenes would have more dramatic music, but in every instance it flat out works. It's majorly evident that a lot of care went into track placement. Yeah, no shit. Even the sound effects are noteworthy. At all times the characters are on a ship, you can hear a faint engine noise in the background, and wind when they are outdoors. The director even brags about a scene where a character walks to a room where the other characters are all asleep, and they recorded all the actors just breathing, which you can only really hear with the volume up. So while we're on the subject of sound, we obviously have to talk about the seiyuu, of which there are no shortage of big names. Rimone is one of my favorite. Mamiko Noto, who is these characters in these shows, rolls as though she gets next to no lines, which she herself mentions in one of the specials. Newcomer Michi Niino does a pretty good job as the main character Aeru, delivering some great emotion. Rieko Takahashi, motherfucking Diana and Kihel from Turn A, may have outright stolen the show as the other lead, Neveril, where her mature tone and mystifying dramatic emotion give the character a true life of her own. Some of the other big names for great performances include Nana Mizuki, Ami Koshimizu, Eri Kitamura, Yukana, and my favorite, Rika Morinaga, whose other roles do not interest me. The only less than great voice is Michiru Aizawa's grating performance as Floe, which happens to be her only anime role ever. The most interesting aspect of Shimon's voice acting, though, is that the voice actors who play the main cast also play everyone else in the show. In the Simone universe, everyone is born female and they have to choose their gender at 17. The series creators use this as an excuse to have all the old men in the series played by girls. And I must say, it's fucking weird. There were some instances where it was impossible to take the men seriously because they sounded so feminine, though it ended up working in the favor of resident Bishonen Anubituf. I can't say whether the males by females decision was a good or bad one, but it's certainly quite interesting to say the least. It's also funny when Mamiko Noto plays any minor character because you can so tell it's her regardless. Yeah, that was probably done for budgetary reasons there, buddy. Visuals. Shimon's animation is a very funny thing, like Sunrise funny. That kind of funny where it can be utterly beautiful 1 minute and then a few shots will be completely fucked up. Or where most of the backgrounds are hand-drawn and Miyazaki looking, while others are more normal and some stuff is CG. This has a lot to do with the director getting what he wants and the art director being eccentric as all hell. You must look at Shinichiro Kobayashi's list of work, all of which use the techniques and all of which are artistically brilliant. Use what techniques? As mentioned, a lot of Shimon's backgrounds are hand-drawn and drop-dead gorgeous. They have a very washed and mystic look that is rare to see in anime, except those listed above, and add a lot to the show's fantasy atmosphere. Meanwhile, the ships and planes, etc. are CG, but don't look ugly at all against the backdrop. CG is very minimalist, with a focus on smoothness and blending in with the rest of the image, which is exactly how it ought to be done. Everything in the series has the aura of mystic beauty that enthralls the viewer into its rich world. Director Nishimura talks in his commentary about the extensive use of heavily detailed stills that they call harmonies. This animation technique was made famous and popularized by the god of directing Osamu Dezaki, who had used him in all of his shows, especially for a dramatic moment at the end of an episode. Nishimura said it was a risky move that got mixed reviews, but he thought it was a very important technique to transition scenes, and that art director Kobayashi was strongly supportive of using them, being as he's an old school guy who loves cells. Evidently, he would hand-produce some cells for this show just because he wanted to. Personally, I'm a huge fan of harmonies when they appear in any series, and when they are done extremely well in Simone to exemplify the emotion of many great scenes. So apparently I hadn't figured out yet that Shinichiro Kobayashi, like, half of those shows that he did, they're named right there, directed by Osamu Dezaki. Just not quite there, research. Also notable is the show's very interesting use of outlines. For the most part, the characters are animated just as you would expect from any modern anime series. However, there are a number of action scenes and otherwise manly, for, women, moments where the outlines get thick as a motherfucker. The most memorable of these is the first appearance of the main character Aeru at the end of episode 1, who is wearing a brown wraparound cape and goggles that make her look like she just flew out of a fucking 70s mecha anime. Needless to say, these moments were epic levels of win. I don't know why that's needless to say. Which, of course, brings me to the character designs. Asako Nishida is both character designer and animation director, which she also did for Tokugatan and Vampire Knight, as well as directing animation in shows like Outlaw Star and Infinite Revius. And going by her commentary with Nishimura, she was a huge part of the show and majorly attached to it. She fangirls over several characters and says how she had drawn her favorite favorites at different points in their life, just for fun and other such things. The designs are consistently niche and consistently nice and wholly sexy on all sides. Most of the girls have a voluptuousness to them that isn't seen much these days, won't say moe, and many the same mystifying beauty carried by all the show's visuals. The fuck? My favorite part of the designs was the hair, namely Aidu and Mamina's hair. Funny, since my brother hated all the hair. Why is that brought up? The breasts were also very nice. It's a goddamn accomplishment to get me to like a woman having large breasts, and I loved it on every single girl in this show, since most were moderate to large. That said, my favorite design was still the Loli Rimone, who also had awesome hair and a bewildered cuteness to her. Her smiles were just all too satisfying. Neveril was a very interesting design because she pulled off the sort of untouchable goddess look better than any character I've seen. I hated her hair, and ordinarily I'd hate her type with the noble look to her, but unlike most noble goddess types, Neveril honestly fit the part of someone that commanded respect and got it. Even when she shows vulnerability, she still seems utterly mighty. It's also worth noting that Nishida had a lot of fun with the males, making them every bit as shonen and voluptuous as the females. As for the consistency of these designs, the director says in the commentary how he was impressed with the consistency from the animators, though I think he's giving a bit too much credit, which Nishida points out. There weren't any terrible inconsistencies, but breast size seemed to be all over the place, and the girls sometimes went from flat face to Junos without warning. God, it's okay because my family is of Jewish descent and we all have Junos, so I don't I'm not it's not a racist thing. Aidu's hair also seemed to get taller in certain spots. There were also several aforementioned sunrise moments where a majorly noticeable animation blunder made no name and I lol. And don't get me started on running. Studio Dean cannot fucking animate running. However, these issues are pretty minor and do nothing to diminish the fact this is an incredibly pretty anime. I also feel the absolute need to bring up the eye catches, those images that show up before and after the commercial break. This show has some of the best eye catches of all time and sort of provides some extra fan service for the show. Every picture is lovingly crafted and outright cumtacularly sexy. Ew. Yeah, so, I don't want to read this whole thing because it goes on forever, but it's all like that. It's me just kind of going through every single possible detail and talking about, that it is good or how it is, which is closer, I guess, to what I would do now. If I was going to write about aesthetics in anime, I would certainly probably cover a lot of this ground. It's just that it's so kind of winding and aimless, and but I do like that I was starting to bring in interviews. I'm starting to really pay attention to the creators. I'm talking a lot about the director commentary, just trying to be more in depth. I mean, this is worlds beyond what we've been seeing up to this point. This is so much closer to the way I write now, so much better, that, it feels like a whole different writer. So you can see how these 2 years of writing experience have paid off in that I've, made this huge leap in the quality of what we're getting. Alright, this one sounds fun. The reason a phrase like shonen exists is so you'll stop bitching about shows that weren't meant for you. People love to bitch about anime, as is made evident by the fact that blogs and exist. It's understandable that people want to talk about anime they don't like, to possibly exercise the frustrations of having sat through a disappointing show. I know what it's like when a show suddenly goes downhill or a character gets on your nerves in a show you like and you want to complain. However, it bothers me to see people complaining about things that they were never meant to like in the first place. Wild Arms Hero captured this phenomenon nicely in his latest Mistakes of Youth comic, though he did it in a completely elitist and ass-backwards way. Yes, it's true, there are people out there who will complain that Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei is a bad show because it doesn't have a plot, but that's the point of Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei. It's a show that was never meant to have a plot, which is the very appeal of the show. If you complain that you want it to have a plot, you're pretty much saying that you wish it was a different show entirely. If this is the case, it's obvious that the show wasn't meant for you to like it. So why complain about it? How can you be upset that a show which was never meant to appeal to you in the first place didn't meet your standards? It's not the show's fault that it doesn't meet your standards because it was never going to. You can't blame it for simply being what it is. The biggest place I see this happening is with shonen anime / manga. Before we even delve into this, I want to step aside and make this very clear. A shonen or shoujo or seinen manga is 100% defined by what magazine it was published in. Just because it seems like it's more intelligent or violent doesn't mean it's seinen if it's published in Shonen Ace. If Fist of the North Star was published in Shoujo Beat, it would be a shoujo manga, period. With that out of the way, I'm tired of seeing people complain about shonen anime not meeting their standards when it's obviously not meant for them. Shonen manga has a target audience of about 8 to 14-year-olds. If you are 21 and you don't like it, it might be because you are 21 and you shouldn't like it. Recently, Bakuractor did a post about how he hated One Piece because he hated Luffy. He lists a lot of reasons for both for disliking the show itself and Luffy as a character, namely that Luffy gets himself into stupid situations and jeopardizes his team. But it's a kids show. It's written for an audience that does want to see Luffy get into silly situations because they think it's funny and enjoy it. They want to see the crying kids and retarded enemies. The value of a kids show like One Piece is not in its ability to appeal to a college student like Bakuraptor and the league of internet tough guys backing him up in the comments, but in its ability to appeal to the children towards which it's aimed. It's meaningless to complain about the show's flaws from your point of view if they aren't seen as flaws by the intended audience. It's like saying death metal music sucks because it has screaming vocals, or a Pokemon game sucks because it's too easy, or a reality show sucks because it has too much drama, or a rap song sucks because it has offensive lyrics. It's not that it sucks, it's that it was never meant for you in the first place. All of these things have an audience who will enjoy them, and that audience is what will determine their real value. And I mean, it's not like you can't like something that wasn't meant for you. There are plenty of great shonen and shoujo series that have appeal to people outside their demographic, and in fact, Bakuraptor himself is a fan of several shonen anime. But if you like it, it's because that particular story coincides with your interests, and not because it is better than the other works of its demographic. I love Soul Eater. It's a shonen anime. I don't generally like shonen anime, which makes sense since it's not aimed at me, but I do happen to like Soul Eater because it has elements that happen to appeal to me. That doesn't mean it's better than other shonen anime, it just means I like it. I know you can't convince the internet to stop bitching about anything, but if it just seems pointless to write... So, this is a fair point I'm making, but I disagree with the concept, because you should just bitch about stuff because it's fun. Like, that's the point of bitching about stuff. I'm sure that all these people complaining aren't doing so because they're mad. And see, the thing is, at this point in my anime writing career, I was very, like, anti-complaining and anti-negativity. Like, I just tried to write about shows I liked for the most part. Very rarely did I write anything like fuck Nanoha. In fact, that was the only one for a long time. And I sort of had to learn to enjoy hating on stuff, and then once I did, I totally got why everybody was doing it. So something like this would not have gotten written at that point. Like, it's not that I'm wrong, it's just that I'm misunderstanding why people like to complain about stuff. It's not that they're making a value judgment on it per se for, like, you know, not doing the job of being their favorite show, but because it's hilarious and fun to rag on shit. So this one time I made this post called The Anime I Just Never Talk About, where I just talked about how there's a bunch of shows that I haven't talked about. Not a good idea. And so a bunch of people decided to play a prank on me where they would say something like, write about robots as parents. Really get into the bones of it. You have Evangelion and Giant Robo there to work with. Draw a parallel with how your own parents do their jobs for you. Don't fuck this up. Write about how Akiyuki Shinbo is in fact the second coming of the Ota King. Compare and contrast him with Anno, Mori, and the other Gainax creators in this regard, or alternatively, what you would have done with the Magical Girl show had they given you Nanoha. Dive deep into the bones of it. Drive to the heart of the nature of fan service. Don't fuck this up. Write about the gunfight action choreography in Black Lagoon and contrast it with Kanon. Go deep into the bones of it, then draw a parallel on how you'd like to shoot your enemies if you had guns and a camera. Don't fuck this up. And this went on all day. So I decided, yeah, I'll do it. So I started that. And this was an important practice, I think, because it taught me how to draw comparisons between things and to just write like almost nonsense shit. Because most of those things were like jokes, but I went and did them anyways. So let's look at this one. A post in the Don't Fuck This Up series in reply to comment number 8 by Ghost Lightning. Kanon and Black Lagoon are without a doubt two of the most badass gunslinging action anime ever produced. The two series have some similarities such as their high production values, dark urban setting, mostly female-dominated action, and of course boatloads, U-boatloads even, of violence. That all said, the action scenes in both shows feature very different choreography from one another, which I will now explore. The bones of it. Black Lagoon. The most important name to know when talking about Black Lagoon's action scenes is John Woo, the Chinese film director known for doing over 30 ultra-violent, badass action films since 1973. To pull an easy descriptive and comparative quote from the back cover of Viz's release of Volume 1 of the Black Lagoon manga, Revy's two-gun style echoes the on-screen combat choreography, sometimes called the bullet ballet, made famous in movies by John Woo. In real life, using two guns like this is highly impractical, since it is virtually impossible to hit anything, especially if the target and the shooter are moving, and it's also difficult to reload. Of course, it looks totally badass on film and in Rei Hiroe's stunning action manga Black Lagoon. This sort of action is all about skirting just past the edge of what is realistically possible. If you tried to reenact the things seen in Black Lagoon in real life, of course none of it would do you any good, but it's not necessarily too out there to pass for possible. Just suspend your disbelief a little bit and have fun. Some of this is subverted heavily in the series, as for all of the room's worth of people Revy guns down, we do also see that she puts countless bullet holes in all of the walls, and she really does have to reload after every so many shots, a complicated looking process that we can believe she has simply mastered. Now you might be saying, Digital Boy, they drove a U-boat into a helicopter, to which I will say, how do you know that doesn't work? It looked probable, and then you will say, but the maid, Roberta, and I'll explain that the show tells us she's a former member of the most vicious military unit there ever was, and we can assume that she is trained heavily to be the most badass thing on the planet this side of Balalaika. Black Lagoon is full of things that, realistic or unrealistic, we expect from an action scene. Taking cover, yelling orders, getting tactical, cutting bullets in half with a sword. Hey, fuck Mythbusters. The Japanese proved it can be done. Kanan. Kanan has no semblance of realism whatsoever. It lets you know this from early on. In the first episode, Kanan spins around a metal pole while firing at individual long-distance targets from within a crowd of thousands, some through walls within seconds. Kanan is more about badass superpowered madness with characters who can easily hop onto a rooftop rather than need to carefully plan an escape to one in a tactical firefight while surrounded, like in Black Lagoon the Second Branch Episode 5. Because Kanan is so much more powerful than most of the people she fights, it's hard for just a normal firefight to remain exciting, thus many of the fights will throw in over-the-top situations or wide-scale destruction to keep things jive. Jive? Why jive? For instance, episode 2 has a car chase complete with psycho cab driver fighting on a moving vehicle in crowded Shanghai, and cars going right over cliff sides to land on rooftops. The biggest difference from the kind of action in Black Lagoon is simply the size of the battlefields. Whereas Black Lagoon would feature battles in a single room while the characters hide behind various pieces in the room and lunge out to shoot, Kanan might have a similar situation wherein entire buildings would substitute a turnover table as cover. That all said, Kanan doesn't have as much of a grip on its style in action sequences. Black Lagoon sets out to be a gritty action series and succeeds wholeheartedly, even when the animation or dialogue wavers a bit. Kanan, on the other hand, only seeks to be badass and doesn't really get a footing on how it wants to go about doing so. As much fun as the show is in its really crazy moments, like Kanan trying to shut down a Tomahawk missile in flight with her mind, the action really falls flat when the show isn't in badass mode. See the kind of awkward combat in Episode 3 or the outright shit in Episode 9. I do wonder about how much of this occasional faltering and constant lack of realism can be attributed to the director, whose other works was sort of The Stranger, the movie with the best fight scenes in any anime, but all done with swords. But it's not all contrast. So I've said that Black Lagoon does quasi-realistic action and does it superbly, while Kanan does whacked-out superhero action mixed with mixed results, but there are places where they are certainly similar. The first is female domination, which is for totally sexual reasons in both shows. In Black Lagoon, it's all about smoking hot babes who could kick you or anyone's ass and love doing it, while in Kanan, it's about chicks who kick ass and make out with other chicks. I want to say that one is a man's fantasy and one is a gay woman's fantasy, but I'll save that for another time. Another similarity is the kind of characters involved. Both of these stories are quite definitively pulp, more so Black Lagoon, and therefore feature a number of eclectic, eccentric characters and organizations. Black Lagoon is a goth chick with a massive chainsaw, a maid with ridiculous power, a samurai who can cut bullets in half, and a certain pair of twins who will haunt you for the rest of your life. Meanwhile, Kanan has the raging sadomasochist Siscon Ling Kui, the fearless and silly Yun Yun, and a mute siren with godnormous tits. Drawing a parallel, I love the styles of fighting in both Kanan and Black Lagoon, but if I were to make my own gunsmoking action show, and I've been working on for over a year, so I assure you I will. I don't know what I mean by I was working on one. It wouldn't be like either of them. My style would have a little of both, mixed with a dash of Baccano, an ounce of Cowboy Bebop, and 2 pinches of Pulp Fiction. Even more so than either show, I'm a big fan of eccentric lesbian characters, and have filled my show, Dark Dreams at the End of the World, with even more of them. Shout out to my novel. My story features a 12-year-old female lead named Dart Coley, who is the leader of a gang called the Ryugane, who seek to take over the city called the End of the World and free it from a rival gang, the Alliance, led by the older woman, Razor Black. It's that kind of story. As for the action scenes, there'd be plenty of gang warfare a la Dead or Alive, the Takashi Miike film, not the porn game, or Technolize, a tactical shootouts like Black Lagoon, sudden quick fights and death like you'd see in a Tarantino flick, bouts between extraterrestrials like Bakano, and an over-the-top ending that will surely put Kanan and Reader Die to shame. I may be obsessed with pulp stories. So yeah, this I actually think is a really big step in the right direction, and it's purely just motivated by the way that those guys pranked me, which thank God they did, and that I decided to go through with this, because, like, I'd never done this kind of straight-up comparison, analyzing two shows and what their differences are before, and I really think, and like this whole idea of getting into the bones of it, which is essentially analyze it in depth, I think this is really what bred me to get really analytical with stuff and to start doing lots of comparative posts over time. I did something similar with Strike Witches and Sengoku Basara, the nudity of concept. Then moved on to this like epic series where I had to go through all of my 100 favorite characters and then like describe all this other shit. It was a really complicated, and I had to compare each one to the first episode of Crest of the Stars. Yeah, every single time I had to find a way to analyze the characters as similar to the first episode of Crest of the Stars. Complicated reasons for that. Okay, so here's another interesting leap. This is where I start getting more into analytical stuff beyond like trying to talk about why a show is good or bad and just raising interesting points about shows. And that's something that I really care about a lot these days. Like I really try to, I still write some stuff that's just like critical analysis, like for instance my Scum's Wish video, but I also do a lot of stuff that's just like, here's why the show is interesting regardless of whether or not that makes it good. So we have Shin Mazinger's epic ancient classical art style. Now that I'm an art college student, I've learned a bunch of boring, shitty modern art terms, as well as a bunch of awesome, badass ancient art terms. Watching the first 6 episodes of Shin Mazinger Shogeki Z-Hen on television, don't worry, I'll finish it soon, brought to mind some of these classic epic stylings. In ancient times, by the way, I never did finish it. In ancient times, all the stories worth telling were about a parade of badasses. We had epics, stories about men of unbelievable power, the gods that were on their side, and the women they laid with. Taking a cue from those ancient stories, the word epic is used nowadays, especially in the last 2 years, to describe something that is just a bit too awesome to simply be called awesome. There are a number of anime that can safely be called epic. Gurren Lagann has been said to parallel the Epic of Gilgamesh even. However, Shin Mazinger is possibly trying the hardest to be spot on with that definition. Let's look at some of the ways. Number 1, the gods are on your side. In ancient stories and art, the gods were pretty much ever present. Take Egypt, where everything managed to come back to Horus and Osiris, the supreme gods, or the Iliad, which has as much to do with warring gods as warring men. Shin Mazinger continues this trend with great purpose, actually having the Greek god Zeus as a character, as well as the representation of Mazinger Z itself. Like a pharaoh or ancient king, Mazinger Z is considered the ruler of robots because it is God, and like an ancient god, it kicks ass. Number 2, hierarchical scale. Okay, so it's commonly considered that the biggest thing is the most badass. The theme of the king being way bigger than everyone else continues today. See Code Geass. We can even see in Gurren Lagann where the increasing size of the hero's robot more or less marks the plot progression. However, Shin Mazinger is willing to put hierarchical scale past the boundaries of reason. The badass enemies control the biggest armies, sure, but Dr. Hell's most notable example, he somehow can project his body to be the size of a fucking mountain for no other reason than to completely assure the viewer that he is the definitive big bad villain. I don't know why I didn't put a picture of him. Number 3, complete disregard for realism. Before we get all these people demanding realism from stories, what was really important to a tale was its level of awesomeness. I mean, which would you rather read? A cookie-cutter war story about imperial expansion, the truth of the Trojan War, or an epic tale of the 10-year war fought over a beautiful woman involving badasses and pissed-off gods, the Iliad as it is known? If you say the former, you're boring. No one cares about historical accuracy. Valkyrie was a boring movie because of all its dramatic tension wasn't changing the fact that Hitler was going to live. Meanwhile, Inglourious Basterds was awesome because it said, fuck history's Nazis gonna die, but I digress. Mazinger destroys all semblance of reality in the name of awesome. The bad guys include a headless dude, a half-man, half-woman, and a guy whose base is in some kind of parallel world of nothing but giant gears. The good guys have motherfucking Zeus. Characters can talk to each other from thousands of feet away because dramatic tension is more important than reality. Every high school gangster in Japan can congregate just so that we learn how awesome Koji is when he hands their leader his ass. This isn't a show where the reasons for things are pseudo-logically explained by science fiction. Everything is just fueled by awesome. Number 4, the legendary poet. Part of what makes the Iliad and the Odyssey so legendary is that they were introduced to the world by insanely long, orally retained poems by a blind guy named Homer. How badass do you have to be to create 2 epics when you don't even have sight? Oh, but Shin Mazinger has quite the legendary background. The Mazinger series was created by legendary Go Nagai, who is one of the most influential manga artists of all time, who practically created some of the most common genres of anime. Then we have the director of the show itself, Yasuhiro Imagawa, renowned for directing some of the greatest super robot anime of all time, namely Giant Robo and Mobile Fighter G Gundam. And like Homer lacking sight, Imagawa creates masterpieces on the tiniest animation budgets. The combination of these epic forces can surely be called a legendary production. Shin Mazinger is a brilliant show in that it is a piece of art that seeks to tell its story in the way that is most entertaining and awesome without being held back by modern ideas of realism and depth of plot. Truly a stylized classic. So yeah, this is a good post. A little rough around the edges, but, it's an analysis. It's drawing an interesting comparison to historical shit. It's cool. I like it. We're getting into stuff that doesn't suck now. All right, here's another one that's like a thought piece. Anime is serious business, but should it have to be? A study of late-night anime. It's 2 a.m. You and a buddy have been playing some game on co-op, and now that you're about halfway through, you think it's time for a little snack break. You grab a soda and cook up some pizza rolls, then you and your friend plop down on the couch and turn on the telly. Nothing in particular is on right now, so maybe you just watch some Gordon Ramsay's show on BBC or whatever random show is playing on Adult Swim or an HBO rerun, just whatever's on. You watch the episode, finish off your snacks, and when the show's over, you and your buddy go back to Gears of War or whatever. Tell me, do you ever watch anime in a context like this? That show you watched, I'm sure you wouldn't call it one of your favorite shows. You probably won't buy the DVDs, you probably won't blog about the show, and hell, you probably won't even watch the episodes at the time they actually air. And yet, when you have nothing better to do, you'll watch that show and you'll enjoy it. You won't race to Twitter to talk about how much the episode sucked or was amazing. It might even be an episode you've seen several times before and, if pressed, could quote from. And yet, you are not going to show it any fanfare. Why? I have seen probably 200 or 300 episodes worth of Family Guy. In the 7 or 8 years it's been on Adult Swim getting rerun incessantly, I've probably seen most of the show 2 or 3 times, and some episodes as many as 10. But have you ever once heard me talk about Family Guy? You haven't, because I am not a fan of Family Guy, and even though I could tell you almost anything about the show, quote any episode, and watch it anytime I'm bored and it happens to be on. And to put it simply, Family Guy doesn't expect me to be a fan of it. Maybe Fox wants that of you, but there's a reason maybe Fox wants that of you, but there's a reason Adult Swim has aired 2 episodes of the show almost every night for 7 years. Because they know that the show is successful as it is, because when you are randomly channel surfing at 11 p.m. or 2 a.m., it is a show that you will stop on for some quick laughs before you get tired enough to pass out. Sure, there are diehard Family Guy fans who will buy all the memorabilia and DVDs and know every minute detail of the show, but more likely you just watch it out of boredom and buy the Stewie t-shirts because you think you are clever. Getting off topic. The Japanese have shows like this too, and even more specifically, they have anime like this. It's called late night anime. I was actually inspired to make this post by the new author of Shelf Life over at Anime News Network, Erin Finnegan, who, by the way, is fucking awesome. I love Bamboo Dong, but they truly couldn't have found a better replacement. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Who points out in her review of Kaze no Stigma Part 2 the nature of late night anime. Based on my own trips to Japan, I have this theory that Kaze no Stigma is a typical late night TV anime series. If you watch it at 2 a.m. on a Monday in Japanese without subs and fall asleep on your couch, you can pretend that you yourself are visiting Japan and seeing what the often mediocre late night anime blog has to offer. Now think about this. These late night shows know that they aren't great. It's not like people make a generic light novel adaptation on an ultra light budget and expect critics to be calling it the best thing of the season. Some of these shows do take the time to get you a little extra. Some like Queen's Blade, which go the extra mile in delivering as much fan service as possible to the insomnia suffering otaku who just wants to rub a good one out before he wanders off to bed. But for the most part, these shows aren't striving to be your new favorite anime. It's just meant to be some light, silly service for otaku that maybe need that extra mind-numbing before they can knock themselves out. It's for the guy who spent all day flaming the latest Haruhi on 2 channel and needs a way to cool his nerves. Of course, there will still be fans of these series, like people who have read the light novel and are big followers of it, or those who genuinely get interested in the plot or characters, but the show isn't asking you to be that guy. It just wants to fill in the empty space. which is why I find it a little problematic when we have bloggers judging these shows with utter seriousness. Man, I can't believe I used the word problematic. I didn't even think I knew that word that long ago. If someone bothers me to see someone putting all this effort into flaming Queensblade for being stupid, derogatory fan service when, well, that's all it was ever meant to be. It's a late night turn your brain off show. It just doesn't work the same if you're bringing in your expectations and getting judgmental. Really just relax and either ignore the show or watch it as the mood permits. There's just no meaning to bashing on a late night anime. It's never going to be a high quality program or anything, and it has no aspiration to be. Right now I'm watching Seitokai no Ichizone and loving it. I haven't blogged about it once, and I won't ever again. I am not rushing to watch it when each new episode airs, nor am I going to put it on my favorites list or write a fan fiction about it. But the show is good fun that, when I'm bored at 2 a.m., is a fun little watch to partake with my otaku friends when we're taking a break from marathoning Shin Mazinger or something. Nothing more, nothing less. Try it sometimes. So the funny thing about this is that its ultimate point is the same as that other post where I was saying that people shouldn't make fun of shows that aren't meant for them. But in this case, up until that point, which I still disagree with that for the reasons I stated earlier, I actually think this was great. Like, it's all about creating a narrative, putting you in this mindset and situation. Might be a little too detailed, but, you know, it's an interesting idea that I'm putting forth. So yeah, I actually am starting to like my writing now. Here's where we get into something more experimental. I was doing episodic posts on Sound of the Sky for a while, so here's how they go. The dream. The cold and dark remains. A time I will never forget. A person I will never forget, persisting in my every dream. Her inspiration, a flame. The strength to go on, in the sound of the sky. I know where the road leads, but not what lies ahead. Even if the path isn't apparent, or if my intuition fails me, I will march on. Today, a new place awaits. In this town I am surrounded by strangers, but they seem to understand my presence. I'm not sure why they are acting strange, but I am warmed by their friendliness. Very quickly I find myself swept up in the festivities of the town and having a blast. A beautiful but harsh woman soon takes me aside. Though she doesn't sing with joy like the people around her, she is the first person who acts normal towards me, and she extends great kindness to me in spite of her rough exterior. I rest and bathe at her home before stepping out onto the veranda. So, okay, I don't want to read this whole thing, but the idea of this was that I was trying to write, like describe each episode of the show from the perspective of the main character writing in her diary, and to sort of like read more nuance, like basically to take the nuance that is presented in the show and read it out, like the stuff that's not stated, and try to explain why they're interesting, I guess. I don't exactly know what I was going for, but I did this for like 6 episodes. So yeah, around this time I started getting a lot more experimental and trying out different styles and shit. I mean, you've probably noticed that there's not been like a very concrete style across this whole blogging history, but this is where I just start like really going all out and trying out different things. By the way, I just want to point out that, like, not unlike by, shit-talking anime YouTubers, there are a lot of posts as I go through here that are just, like, about how every blogger is doing something wrong or something. Like this one, I'm just complaining that bloggers aren't passionate enough. Like, people are trying to cover the popular shows instead of covering the stuff that's really interesting to them. Yeah, that's just a lot. It just happens all the time. Here's one I remember being interesting. I'm going to read these. Some of these I'm reading just because, like, I want to remind myself of them, and now's a good chance, because, like, some of these I've thought about adapting into videos again. So anyways, why I see Gensokyo more clearly than any anime world. One of the things that anime is surprisingly not very good at is creating a fully realized fictional world. When you open up a fantasy book, and fantasy is of course the best genre for fictional worlds, you are often confronted with a world map right off the bat. You'll be given details about all sorts of countries and locations and customs, etc. to bring this world to life as you read. The reason that this doesn't really happen in anime is for the same reason it does happen in a whole lot of JRPGs. Time. Anime aren't long. Usually they are 4 to 8 hours long, which is hardly enough time to create a whole world and fill it with meaningful characters. Lord of the Rings trilogy took about 10 hours, around 30 episodes of anime, and good luck finding many as good as Lord of the Rings. Actually, the biggest beef I have with a lot of anime stylistically, especially in fantasy and adventure stories, is the lack of a fully realized world. It's the meat that makes you feel like what you're watching is really happening somewhere, and not just anonymously existing in a world bent to the convenience of the story. I like Scrapped Princess, but it had this terrible lack of sense about the world. We knew that the characters were fleeing one country for the next, but we never knew how big these countries were, or how far along they had traveled, or what this country was like. That show comes forth with a lot of details that are so out of left field that they have you constantly reconciling new developments against what you've seen so far, and then you have to realize that the world was always intended to be that way, they just didn't tell me so. I guess that's what the novels of the show is based on are for. Even a series with a beautiful, stylized world like Last Exile fails to give you any real sense of the world, and that show too gets a little head-scratchy when the world suddenly looks different in ways you didn't expect later in the game. All of this is why most anime stay away from world building altogether and reuse the same familiar landscapes or otherwise make the world consistently random. A series like One Piece or Kino's Journey can use a setup to their advantage where they keep certain things consistent throughout the stories so that it feels together, but use the fact that all of the locations are far apart from one another to make each one unique on the author's whim. If there's one series that stakes the claim of moving in the right direction, it's 12 Kingdoms. I guess deserving of its title as one of the greatest anime fantasy series of all time, which gives you a world map and does a lot to develop that world and until it ends after 45 episodes, leaving a lot of it yet to be explored and therefore alien to the viewer. As it stands, I think the only anime that have been long enough to do a good job developing their worlds have been shown in action shows like Dragon Ball and One Piece, but once again, they are so random in their consistency that it's hard to think of the world as cohesive. And I'm not saying that anime cannot create good settings. Haibane Renmei, the Aria series, and now Sora no Oto have shown us that anime can create an amazing setting, but you'll notice that all of those series take place almost entirely in one city. That, I'm afraid, I cannot consider a world. Even a continent might be fine for that consideration, but not a city. I want to see a world like a JRPG has. I can fully visualize the world map of Tales of Symphonia 5 years after playing it because it was such a fully realized, fully explorable, and immersive world. But then wait, why the hell can I see Gensokyo more clearly than any other world? I'm not basing that on non-canonical Gensokyo either. If you've ever played any Touhou, a bullet hell game series, then you know the background art is quite generic, and you can only even get a semblance of where you are at any time by the game's vague dialogue. However, there's something magical about what ZUN has created in the Touhou franchise, and I feel this applies to the characters as well as the world they live in. It's built entirely on implications. Having a look at, for example, the story of Embodiment of Scarlet Devil from the past game in the series, we have established that the lead character Reimu lives in a shrine in the world of Gensokyo, which is largely populated by all sorts of classical Japanese monsters, some humans, and a lot of eccentric people. In Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, we learn that there is a mansion somewhere that Ramilia Scarlet and her family lives in, and it's where the main characters go to beat the game. The first stage has the character flying through a long forest, the second over a massive lake, and the third at the strange-looking entrance to the mansion. Therefore, we can create an image in our head that if you leave the forest surrounding Reimu's house, fly for a while, and pass over a huge lake, you will eventually get to the Scarlet Devil Mansion. We learn that the mansion has a massive library as well as that it is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and that it is populated by many, many maids. We are given only a couple of lines of dialogue from each character we meet with only the tiniest implications of their personalities. ZUN has written some background information on them, but it's mostly telling. He tells us a lot of things about the characters, but even when he does, he is sketchy about it, claiming a lot of things to be rumors, or stating that sources may be more or less correct than they seem. The only time he gives us any scenarios involving the characters, it has a strong bias on the part of the narrators in question, skewing information further. Point being, there isn't a whole lot that is given to the player as facts about Touhou, but a lot of things that are given as inspiration. With Touhou, it is possible to completely create the world and the characters inside of your head, all your own, and yet be correct about it. If you read me a lot, you probably have seen me talk a lot about creator's intent. If there's one thing I think of myself as great at, it is metering creator intent. I look at the background info of a show, the previous work of a creator, what I can find out about their personality, what the scenes and dialogue mean at their core, and I gauge what I think is the creators of a series really intended for you to see with their part in it. That was a confusing sentence. Because of this, I don't really use my imagination too much about what isn't given to us in a series. I don't go adding things into a fictional world that I may not know have a place there, because I am more interested in what the creators wanted me to see, and likewise, when I create things, I don't like to leave much open to debate. I want you to fully understand my message, which is probably why I qualify my statements so much, lol. Now, if I truly feel that I grasp the intent of the creators, I can expand on it. I would feel comfortable writing a fanfiction about the future romance of Ryuji and Taiga from Toradora because I feel that I grasp their characters and their story perfectly and that I could represent them in line with the narrative. However, sometimes there are series that give you more breathing room. I'm talking about when a creator's intent is for the viewer to find their own meaning. I find myself taken to the band System of a Down, who in interviews would always state that they would never explain the meanings of their lyrics because they wanted the fans to come up with their own. As a lifelong listener of their music, I have of course developed meanings for all of their songs, and I can completely be confident that all of my meanings are correct because the band themselves stated that their intent was for me to assume that of my own interpretation. Touhou is likewise a series wherein I feel a lot has been purposefully left to the consumer. ZUN will tell you some things and dispel some rumors so that the characters in the world have some official aspects, but the whole of the worldview is as also officially as you interpret it. Therefore, even though there is no provided view of the world of Gensokyo, I can be utterly confident in my vision of it, as comprised from the random facts and inspirations laid before me. In my head, there is a calculated distance between the human village, the Aientai Mountain, and the Scarlet Devil Mansion, and I can mentally travel the characters from one location to the next and let them interact with one another in the perfect light that I imagine them to interact. This is why Touhou was such an engrossing franchise for me. It has endless possibilities, because it is not weighed down by what content exists. I love Neon Genesis Evangelion because it provides me with a lot to think about, but the bottom line is that it will never be more than it is to me. As much digging as I could do to find all of its treasures, I will eventually know everything about Eva, and while I will love that, it will simply be all there is. I will never run out of scenarios for Gensokyo. In my mind, I can make anything happen there, and therefore I can never stop finding new things to love about the series. I think it's pretty amazing that I feel so attached to the characters in their world just from reading straightforward facts and concepts surrounding them, but I have already imagined so much of their existence that it's like I've watched them for hundreds of episodes. I can safely say that I know more and have a better vision of Gensokyo than I have ever had of an anime world. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I dig it. Alright, let's try this one. This is once again, we're going back to the well on the perfection versus non-perfection, or the favorites versus good and all that. It's getting into the bones of the like versus enjoy conflict. It exists. You have it. Yesterday, Ghost Lightning did a post about how it's possible for him to like a show that he did not enjoy, and to conversely enjoy a show that he did not like. I at first decried this as impossible for myself. After all, I'm known for not putting up with things I don't enjoy. My enjoyment seems to be intrinsically tied to what I do or don't like. However, I mulled around with the thought and realized that holy shit, like and enjoy are two totally different things. And then I finally cracked open on something I've been fighting for a while. I've always hated the way that people often declare their favorites as separate from what they consider the best anime, and now I've stumbled on the real meaning of those dual lists. It's a difference between what you like and what you enjoy. They aren't the same? So what's the difference between liking something and enjoying it? Ghost Lightning talks more about things that he didn't enjoy but liked that he had seen, as well as things that he really liked but did not enjoy the experience of. The part italicized above is where my definition will differ from Ghost Lightning's, although I do still understand the concept of hating something but being glad you know about it. I hate Shakugan no Shana and Zero no Tsukaima, but having seen the first seasons of both really helped me to understand the fandom at the time. However, I wouldn't attribute that to having had anything to do with the show itself. Even though Ghost Lightning likes having seen Double Zeta, it's not as though he liked the show, at least not in the way I imagine he liked but did not enjoy Grave of the Fireflies. Nay, the way I would define liking something in the context of being as opposed to enjoying it is finding something in the work that you recognize as being exceptional. Another phrase would be something that fits your taste. A lot of people like to create a separate list of what they think are the best anime, but that's just a humongous hunk of bullshit. The thing they are seeing is a series that is the perfection of what they consider a likable series to be. It's the highest upholder of their standards, you could say. Fact is, people don't have the same standards. The best way I can rub this in your face is to tell you that I consider Kanan and Kurenai to be works of the utmost highest quality. If you disagree with that statement, then congratulations, you now understand that there is no ultimate standard. Think I just have bad taste? Ask around. Chances are you'll find that everyone has bad taste by your standards. The truth is, you are seeing what you like, which might not necessarily match up with what you enjoy. I think these are what people call guilty pleasures, shows that a person finds themselves enjoying in spite of the fact that it goes against the things that they like. It can be hard to reconcile that difference, but the fact is that there are certain series that you can find a million things wrong with and not be able to put down. But it's not like these things are automatically opposed. On the contrary, what I found as I scored Mal was that I have a level of enjoyment and a level of liking for every single show, a statistic I could call to mind without fail. Now, because I had a level for everything, obviously those levels differed frequently. For instance, I definitely would say that I enjoyed G Gundam more than I liked it. Reason being, I consider pacing, directing, and tightness of storytelling to be very important. G Gundam goes against those things, where at another show, I might have outright disliked it. However, there was enough to enjoy about it that I still loved it. Another example in the other direction is Millennium Actress. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it, on the contrary, I greatly enjoyed the film, but even more so, I truly liked it. It was one that I would consider by my standards to be the most perfect film, one of the most perfect films ever created. But that said, I didn't enjoy it so much that it might have been my favorite movie. However, these aren't good examples here because I liked both and enjoyed both to an extent, even if one feeling is greater than the other, and that's fine. It's probably true for everything I've seen. I'll certainly be writing a follow-up post about the implications of such on one's favorite list, but for now, what I really want to look at is shows that I liked in spite of not enjoying at all, or enjoyed in spite of not really liking. There are actually a lot of examples that I think I liked in spite of not enjoying, usually because they were works that I recognized what I perceive as value, but could not personally get involved with. Most of these fall into two categories, old and art house. Because I'm very much a product of my generation, even when I appreciate older things, I sometimes have a hard time getting into them. And likewise, I really see the value in and appreciate these art house shows, but I can't connect with them. Some examples would be Assemble Insert, Castle of Cagliostro in 1919 for old, and Angel's Egg, really most of Oshii's work, Kaiba and Mind Game for art house. The next type is shows that I can appreciate the effort put into and the reasons people would get into them but just can't enjoy. The best examples are the 12 Kingdoms and Crest of the Stars. In both cases, I think they are great shows deserving of their fan bases, but I just can't handle their genre. But then, I think most interestingly, there are the cases of shows that yeah, okay, you get it. I don't know why this post is so long. You get the point. It's an interesting idea, and I kind of bring it up in a similar way still, but yeah, it's sort of the genesis of it. Yeah, we're really getting into a point where I'm starting to feel like these posts are generally interesting. They're just really rough around the edges in the writing, and I have such a fucking pompous attitude that it's insufferable. And people think that about me now. So, okay, now we can finally see the part. This is where the next big evolution in my writing style happens. So, I wrote this post called You Have an Undying Love for What? And the general idea of it is that I'm talking about how my cousin had an undying love for Yu Yu Hakusho. That's how he described it. He just has an undying love for it. And it got me thinking about whether I have an undying love for anything. So I start going on about Rurouni Kenshin and how I used to love it, but now I don't think I do. And then I start talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And how maybe I have an undying love for that. It's a little overlong and winding. Now, at the same time, I had just started up a writing class in college that I was taking individually. I was just taking a writing class for that semester. And the first paper I turned in was on the same day as I wrote this post, and my teacher told me, simplify, simplify, simplify. And I'd simplified it and turned it into again, and he told me even more stuff that could be cut out, and I was just like, holy shit, like it never occurred to me how much you could cut out of something. So I went back to that post, that one I was just showing you, and recognized how much of it could be cut. So I decided to try to write this as a cut down post. Now remember, I read you that post about the characters, about the how chemistry is what really matters. Here's the version I wrote now that I had this new writing style as a test, and you'll notice that this has one of the biggest discussion threads I've ever had on my blog, because once I learned how to be concise, people could actually read my fucking shit. So, this is why I keep telling everyone, cut down your fucking shit. Cut out all the bullshit. Cut it down to be concise, because people will be way more interested in reading it if it's concise. So, interesting characters, deep developed and chemical. Who knew the ramen guy had so much backstory? In my years of reading anime reviews, I have seen many writers try and define what makes a good character, usually citing a certain element of characterization that they find most important in doing so. Leaving aside the obvious fact that character interpretation is subjective, I want to try and distinguish the different elements that can be used to make a show's characters interesting. In this post, I'll be discussing the conventional elements of character depth and development, as well as the element of chemistry, which is less commonly mentioned in anime reviews. Even that paragraph could have been cut down significantly, but whatever. Before I begin, let me state that the example I use for each element are purely based on personal interpretation. Character depth is generally measured in how much we get to know about a character, as well as how much of what we learn makes any damn sense. A shallow character would be one with little personality, a weak or non-existent backstory, unclear and uninteresting motivations, or inconsistent behavior, ex Louise from Zero no Tsukaima. The more that a character is fleshed out and made to feel alive, the deeper they get, bottoming out at a thorough exploration of the character's life, feelings, preferences, interactions, and psyche. Neon Genesis Evangelion is the one series known for depth of its characters, to the point that each of them resembles a living human being and could be easily described in full by the viewers. By the way, it's funny that I keep using Louise as a negative example whenever I bring this up, because I usually use her as a positive one now. It'd been a long time since I'd seen the show, and she just kind of got beat up on a lot by anime fans. But when I revisited the show later, I found I liked her a lot more than I first thought. Character development is a process through which a character evolves, be it in mentality, viewpoint, or an actual altering of the psyche. Development is most often associated with the gradual progression of a character's state of mind from one point to another, though it can also occur through sudden traumatic or epiphanic triggers, or in a shittier series, designed by committee and a lack of ideas. Many see a character's ability to develop a humanizing quality, since real people certainly don't often go through life without ever changing. One character who doesn't develop much through the series is Light Yagami of Death Note fame, who sticks to one idea from the beginning of the show to the end, contrasted by the oft-compared Lelouch from Code Geass, whose emotions and objectives alter course many times throughout the series' run. Chemistry between characters is a bit of a different animal in that it deals less with the character as an individual and more with their place in a group. Chemistry occurs when characters work well together to create interactions that are interesting and entertaining in themselves. It's possible for characters to have great chemistry together without being deep nor developing, and it's also possible for the interactions themselves to give depth to a character and propel their development. It's not often that you find a show with complete absence of chemistry between characters. It usually occurs only in cases where the writing on the whole leaves something to be desired, such as your generic harem show, or in a series like Boogie Pop Phantom where character interaction is minimal. Meanwhile, many shows, especially comedies, bank everything on the strength of their character interactions. The perfect example of this is Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei, a show in which every character has exactly one or two personality traits that never change, but are entertaining when all placed together. Of course, the prominence of each element is different for every show. Bakemonogatari would be an example of a series with deep characters who show definitive development and have excellent chemistry together, while an example of how to bottom out in all three elements would be Golgo 13. Any of these elements, or even the lack thereof, depending on your priorities, can give the viewer a reason to care about the characters in a series. For me, chemistry is the most important element, to the point that while I do greatly appreciate depth and development, I can enjoy a series that depends solely on well-done chemistry, and can't enjoy a show that has too little of it. That's why 12 Kingdoms bored me to tears. Its superbly deep and developed lead had almost no one to interact with. Meanwhile, although Bakuno has a number of reasonably shallow and static characters, it manages to be one of my favorite anime because the interactions of those characters are so exciting. Now I ask of you, going on my definitions and not necessarily my examples, which elements of characterization do you appreciate the most, and which are you capable of dealing without? So yeah, then I mentioned that this is a rewrite of the previous post. And yeah, I got a lot of comments. So the problem with this, and this is pretty decently written. This is fine, and I would do a few more in this style, which I've opened up. I don't even know. This one can't be one of those. Yeah, like I would always open them with like a quote, and there'd be like lots of little bolded parts and stuff, and it's all about like trying to make my point as fast as possible. And with that first one, my biggest problem with it was that it didn't have enough character. Like it didn't sound like me. So here's me trying to do that, and then imbuing it with more of my own voice. This is only 2 days later, but this is at a period where I'm like really trying to craft a style here. Love cannot be bound by standards, but I really wish that it could. From Ghost Lightning, complex rating systems just kill me. Maybe someday such a system can explain to me how much I fucking love Macross 7. Shakugan no Shana sucks and I hate it, so why the fuck did I just move the episodes back to my computer? Why did I burn them to a fucking DVD in the first place? Why, after 3 years of hating the show, do I now feel the drive to watch it again? Sadly, I think the answer is love. This isn't a case of my heart score being higher than my head score, seeing as, that's in reference to another rating system I came up with, seeing as Shauna gets straight 6s. I certainly don't have an undying love for it, what with the show having pissed me off more before I even finished it. Today I only had to rewatch one episode to remember that Shakugan no Shana is below any standards that I've ever had. In fact, most of the episode was actually painful to watch, and I'm not all that convinced I'll make it through the whole thing. Come to think of it, I technically haven't even finished all of Shana, since the second season made me rage quit after 4 episodes. So why? Why am I coming back to this show that practically has no redeeming factors? I don't care about any of the characters besides Shauna, and the way that she's written infuriates me. Noiji Ito's amazing character designs are slapped in the face by this shit animation. Not even the fights are entertaining, mostly because the director sucks a fat cock. Plus the plot is trite. I mean, I seriously fucking hate this show. The only good things about it are the badass original ending song and the eye catch music. I knew all this back in September 2007, yet I was still browsing Toys Logic for Shauna figures mere days after finishing the series, fully intent on letting her be my first figure purchase. You will never see Shauna on any of my favorite characters lists, but damn if I do not have a moe for her a mile wide. In the course of these 3 years, I've resigned to thinking of the show and characters as things that I like for no reason whatsoever. I was desperately searching for one as I watched the first episode, but the best I could come up with was that I liked the cool glowing colors used on all the paranormal stuff. And I guess the presence of Rie Kugemiya, though she had like 8 damn lines, one of which was her ultra annoying Urusai Urusai Urusai, and that's about it. I like to try and define exactly how I feel about every show I watch. Hell, that's practically the whole reason for this blog. But there's just no way that I would put up with Shauna's level of bullshit from any other show. The only reason I could come up with for why this series still holds a place in my heart is that, well, it just fucking does. Have you ever felt a completely irrational love for a show that does everything you hate? So yeah, this one is like pure my personality and not even based in any kind of logic. Which is kind of interesting in its own right. Yeah, so it goes on like that for a while. So another thing that I tried to do more and more over the years was to really come up with totally unique perspectives that I wasn't seeing anyone else saying. I mean, as you've seen so far, I do focus a lot on myself, but there wasn't a lot of like me trying to look at anime through a wholly different lens than most people. Or to like try to recognize patterns and stuff like that, which is something I've always been good at. I'd say that's like one of my special talents as someone talking about anime, is that I can recognize these sort of patterns and stuff. And I would encourage anybody who's trying to be a writer to find like what unique things you can bring to the table. So here's one: 800 Days of Fusakenna and 8 awesome 8th episodes of anime. I tend to miss my blog's benchmarks. I realized in June that my 3rd anniversary had passed in April, and I'm not sure when I broke 300,000 hits, but I'm already halfway to 400,000. Most of all, I've missed my specially numbered posts, or realizing after the fact that I've made them. Well, today I was lucky and noticed that this will be my 800th published post. It's a great mark to have because 8 has always been a special number to me. I was born on August 8th, weighing 8 pounds and 8 ounces, so to mark the occasion I'll be listing off 8 of my favorite episode 8s. 8 tends to be an important episode number in anime. In a lot of 26-episode shows, the 8th episode marks the transition from plot setup to actual movement of events, and will often feature a shocking twist or revelation that changes the way that things will happen from there on out. This is a common enough practice that I could make a list of just transitional 8th episodes, but of course being an important episode doesn't necessarily qualify as being memorable and awesome one, so this list will take 8 episodes from any series. The requirement for consideration on this list was that the 8th episode wasn't just great, but was one of the most memorable or amazing episodes in the entire series. Oh, and you can count on there being spoilers for each episode. So yeah, it's just 8 episodes that, like, in My Hime, it was where things suddenly got dark. In Evangelion, it's where Asuka gets introduced, majorly changing the nature of the series. Fullmetal Alchemist has the one where fucking Ed gets a fucking whatever, the damn Al the Killer episode, which is great. Claymore is a big turning point episode. Simone is a big turning point episode. Kamichu is just the cool cat fight club one. Kashurin Sins is just one of the better episodes of the show, mostly episodic series. And of course, Gurren Lagann, the most famous big turning point, episode 8. Honorable mentions for Gaku and Alice, and this post being a reference to 500 Days of Summer. So yeah, that's just like a pattern that I picked out, and it's just the end of Act 1 tends to fall in episode 8. So thought it would be cool to write about. So this is where, again, throughout 2010, I was really sort of analyzing my own writing style and trying to change it in different ways. So at one point I had made this other blog that was just for manga, and the whole idea of this blog was that I was going to write in a different style that wasn't like my very outlandish and confrontational style that you've probably noticed I tended to bring to my posts, with all the swearing and the fucking edginess. So I had this series called Manga Pages where I was trying to go panel by panel and like break down what was interesting about different manga series. So here's Manga Pages for Kurozuka. Love can do some interesting things to people, and the first 3 chapters of Noguchi Takashi and Yume Makura Baku's Kurozuka are a great example of how someone's face can evolve while falling in love. This post will study the gradual change in Kuromitsu's facial expression over the course of the first 3 chapters while she rapidly falls in love with Yoshitsune. So yeah, bam, right off the bat, perfect opening paragraph, because of the fact that this is supposed to not be me. So because I've completely cut off this whole narrative where I'm like constantly, for some reason, introducing myself and how I got into the series every time, it's just right to the point. I am called Kuromitsu. From the very first pages of Kurozuka, it's evident that Kuromitsu is a mysterious woman. She has the face of someone with an important secret and a sense of confidence in the fact that no one knows who she really is. There's almost a sense of evil about her. It's clear that she's up to something. Quite possibly she was planning to eat Yoshitsune and his servant at first, and this is the look of a serpent eyeballing her prey. She seems to know that she wants Yoshitsune from the moment she lays eyes on him. Once again, I think that she might have been planning on eating him, but as things progress, it becomes clear that she honestly wants him around for other reasons. By the start of the second chapter, her expression changes a bit. Her smile and wide eyes don't seem so evil, but rather pleasant. This is also where she starts to attach herself to Yoshitsune. Shortly after this, Kuromitsu confesses her love to Yoshitsune, begs him to stay with her forever, and the two have a whole lot of sex. It's quite clear that they've both fallen for one another. This is why Kuromitsu is terrified when Yoshitsune breaks his promise not to peek into her room and sees her the way that she didn't want him to. However, Yoshitsune defends her moments later when a group of assassins shows up to kill both of them. Not once, but twice. The face she makes the first time is surprised, but the second time it's both surprised and touched. She's just realized exactly how important this man is to her. Moments later, Kuromitsu gets her arm cut off, but she takes it up in her teeth and goes right into battle. There isn't a trace of sadism or evil in this face. It's a face of determination to protect the one that she loves. As she explains to Yoshitsune the abnormality of her body, her eyes are pleading, hoping that he really does love her and that he won't leave her now that he knows the truth. Of course he won't. Yoshitsune offers to make a heroic sacrifice for her sake, but Kuromitsu is ready to take him with her to the end of time. So far, Kurozuka has a fairly interesting manga. I wasn't grabbed by the first 2 chapters, but the third one had some amazing action scenes, and I loved watching the changes in Kuromitsu from someone that was a little off-putting to someone that I wanted to follow to the end of time. So yeah, now we're getting just strictly analytical here. We've cut off the entirety of me, this whole gonzo, it's all about me approach, and we're just writing analysis. And this was kind of an important gauntlet for me as a writer, because I did this blog for a while without ever announcing who it was. Like, I never tied it into my posts. I just was writing analytically, and I ended up really falling in love with this style, and so I really expanded on it as I went forward. Here we've got another one of the pattern recognition things I did, and this one was later adapted into a video. Anime with 11 or 22 episodes being interesting. You can find that as a scripted vlog on my main channel. I think it was scripted. Oh, and here's another one I adapted into a video. When you see it, you'll shit bricks. Look-alike roles. Where I'm just talking about how a character, a bunch of characters by the same actor will look the same. Honestly, at this point, like, the adaptations of these posts are not really all that different from the originals. Like, the writing style is slightly different, but it's more about adapting it to video and fleshing out the points than it is about, like, fundamentally changing what I said or anything. So here's a review I wrote of the first Nanoha movie that I wrote while I was in the Philippines, and apparently I was trying to write it in the style of Roger Ebert's Great Movies articles. So this is where, and I'm sure I'd done this a bunch of times before. In fact, I know I did this a bunch of times before, and I'll get into one of them in a minute. But I would often try to copy the style of other writers, which has always been a thing I've done. You've probably known that because I did it in Your Anime Sucks, Sword Online, where I copied Your Movie Sucks. I've done lots of videos that are directly trying to copy the style of somebody else. So, that's something I encourage. Copy my style. Copy others' styles until you can use all their elements to create your own. So here's me trying to write in the style of Great Movies. Nanoha the movie first is sold on one fantastic battle scene and one fantastic dialogue scene that wouldn't be possible without the rest of the movie, even though they overshadow it in such a way that they alone deserve rewatching again and again. Nanoha's problems as a film come from the problems it had as a TV series and the problems of its production. In the later case, Nanoha suffers the general weakness of being produced by Seven Arcs, a mediocre studio that, when given the kind of budget to make this film, succeeded only in not fucking it up, without doing much to elevate to the level it could have reached. There are no ugly images in this film, yet the fights aren't cool. Effort was put into enhancing formerly ugly, uncool fights into uncool fights that just look fine. This can be attributed to the studios never having worked on a movie before, nor anything above mediocre low-budget late-night TV shows. The problems that the TV series had were generally being awful and poorly planned. Nanoha Season 1 begins as a generic Maho Shoujo item collecting story, then evolves into a story about a tragic girl seeking redemption through friendship. The resulting emotional plot about Nanoha and Fate's friendship is the money of the show, but the presentation is awful. The story is stupid, not well thought out, and entirely forgettable. Nanoha the movie first doesn't change any of this. It removes a lot of the useless meandering of the series, streamlining the story into a more cohesive whole, but it doesn't change the fact that the story is stupid to begin with. What we get is just a better looking, less lame retelling. I can look past this. The stupidity of the plot isn't important. It only becomes a problem when it stands in the way of scene progression and the better parts of the movie. Towards the end, when Priscia explains her past and motives, she repeats herself incessantly. I can summarize 20 minutes of dialogue as follows. Priscia was a scientist that didn't spend too much time with her daughter. Her daughter died in an accident, so Priscia cloned her. However, the clone wasn't exactly the same as the original, so Priscia treated her like shit and longed for her real daughter to be reborn. These few plot points are repeated again and again as if the movie isn't sure we understand why the characters act the way they do, so it must more thoroughly restate exactly what it just said. At this point, the movie wouldn't be worth watching without its best scenes. Between the lame fights and sometimes annoying dialogue, I wouldn't want to go through the whole thing again. However, if I have to watch the whole movie while introducing it to a new viewer, I can watch all of it for the payoff of the two best scenes. First is the final battle between Nanoha and Fate, which Nanoha prefaces by calling it their first and last real fight. The setup of this fight is great because of Nanoha's total confidence in her victory and the friendship she will share with Fate thereafter. We learn that the Bureau intends to use the fight to their advantage no matter which of the girls wins, but Nanoha doesn't know this. Nanoha's victory would be imminent with or without their help because she hasn't a doubt in her mind about how much ass she's going to kick. She and Raising Heart have an ace in the hole that will ensure victory. The fight is set up to resemble an aerial dogfight, with the girls' flight patterns moving in deliberate jet paths, and cuts of their pink and yellow trails are left like exhaust. There are even scenes of the girls firing at one another, wherein their bullets appear to curve through the air. Like the rest of the film, the battle is full of anime conceits and the general lack of measurable attack effectiveness that makes so many anime battles fail, but there's enough intensity to the animation and emotions of the characters that the battle remains entertaining. At the end of the fight, Nanoha cashes in on her confidence. Fate, tired out, launches everything she has at Nanoha, thinking that Nanoha must be just as tired. Nanoha is barely hurt and retaliates with her newly devised ultimate attack, a riff on the Spirit Bomb technique from Dragon Ball Z, which completely obliterates Fate, showing that Nanoha was on an entirely different level all along. The other brilliant scene is the ending, when Nanoha and Fate finally get to meet properly, knowing it'll be more than 6 months before they get to see one another again. It's a big, gay, emotional dialogue exchange, an I love you man moment taken to its furthest extremes until it's actually a thinly veiled lesbian confession. Supposedly, several people who worked on the show consider it canon that the scene was exactly that, and that Nanoha and Fate are without a question a couple. The scene is sold by its sheer honesty and straightforward lack of embarrassment. Fate's life will never be the same. Nanoha has changed her entire world and become its most important inhabitant. Nanoha has found a best friend for life. They spill their guts and embrace one another, trade hair ties as mementos, and tearfully depart. It's the gushiest, most fulfilling friendship moment in anime. Ultimately, though, Nanoha the movie first is worth watching because Nanoha A's comes after it and cashes in on the characters, the themes, and more than anything, the development of Nanoha and Fate's relationship. Nanoha A's wouldn't be as utterly amazing as it is without the origin story of Nanoha and Fate's relationship, and retroactively, Nanoha and Fate's story means even more when we know where it'll take them both in A's and in Strikers. The existence of those future stories is what lifts Nanoha the movie first from a decent movie with great scenes to a worthwhile movie with a fantastic ending. While it would be understandable for someone that doesn't like the movie to end their involvement with the series there, it would be seriously remiss for anyone that enjoys the movie not to cash in on their enjoyment with the superb sequels. Thankfully, Nanoha A's will be receiving its own film adaptation in the near future. So yeah, this is really a style of just cutting out anything that's not interesting to talk about and focusing on just the elements that are worth commenting on, the most unique aspects of the film, the stuff that like most makes it stand out from anything else. And there's nuggets of talking about the rest of the movie, but that stuff doesn't really matter because we're really talking about what is this movie's what is this movie's unique trait? Which I haven't read Roger Ebert in a very long time, since he's been dead for quite some years. But yeah, you can definitely tell that this is closer to my current writing style than anything we've looked at so far. And then we get into my B-Train posts, fucking Mad Lax episode 1. So the style that I use in like the Sword Art Online videos and stuff kind of harkens back to this, because this is when I finally learned to just enjoy hating something. And I guess I changed my name to Digibro at this point. My name is Digibro and I hate B-Train. I've watched a handful of episodes from a lot of B-Train shows, though besides .hacksign I've never finished one. I decided to use Mad Lax for my first tirade because it's one of the only Girls with Guns shows that I haven't seen any of. Episode 1 didn't disappoint. The episode introduces itself as another shitty B-Train anime with a picture-perfectly terrible opener. Some creepy little girl babbles a pretentious, nonsensical monologue that doesn't and never will mean anything significant. Her hair is aggravatingly in front of one eye, symbolic of the overwhelming emo yet to come, and just for effect she's got a doll and wears a nightgown because, oh, dissonance, so deep. The background images try to look trippy, but as always with B-Train, their inability to draw and animate anything cool stunts the effect. Kajira Yuki's always amazing music playing over the scene makes it feel even more utterly fucking pretentious. The first shot of Mad Lax, our leading lady, is impressively ugly. My viewing partner, who couldn't sustain awareness for more than a minute at a time during this episode, put it nicely. It's no glamour shot. The truth, as we discover, is simply that Mad Lax is an ugly-ass character design, never helped by the wildly terrible illustrations of the series. So yeah, it goes on like this. I'm getting really tired, so I want to get through this as fast as possible, but, you know, this is, you can hear that, like, going through every single thing with this snide, punchy, like, working my insults into the sentence in a more clever way. It's not just me saying fuck every 2 words like it was back in that fuck Nanoha thing, or going into weirdly gross and horrifying statements that are edgy as shit. I'm kind of cleverly jabbing at the thing and, like, you know, rolling with the punches, and it's actually fun to read. And here's another thing where I copied someone else's style. So my friend Bakaraptor had this style called an unbiased review. And the way he would do it is he'd list 5 things that sucked, 5 things that ruled, and 5 things he was indifferent about in like whatever he was reviewing. So I thought this was the best way to talk about video games, because with video games there's just so many different things to talk about that boiling it down to like 15 noteworthy elements was an easier way to do it. So I've got Persona 2 here, and it's like I break down the 5 things that sucked: the voice acting, the grinding, the traps, the bomb shelter, and the final boss. So, and I just like go through why those things sucked. Then 5 things that rocked: the characters, the city, the designs, the premise, music, and sound. And I just kind of go into detail about each of those. This has been a very convenient like process to try to like to use this style, because the way I write now, I do kind of compartmentalize things into parts, where I will write my videos by like, I kind of have a list of things I want to talk about, and I just go down the list, fleshing out each thing one at a time, which is why a lot of my videos that are like more reviewy, like say the Masamune-kun one, is kind of like this. It's like I'm breaking down each element in order, rather than, usually in order of how interesting I think it is a thing to talk about. Did another one for Killer 7. So at this point, we've gotten into where I started making videos, essentially. I mean, I skipped forward a bit, but the evolution of my style is kind of like a well-oiled machine at this point. As you've seen, the posts are starting to sound more and more like me, and, you know, it's just a matter of, like, tweaking little things here and there. I want to break down one of my MLP videos. This one was probably the most memorable, and we can go through this and see how it's evolved from here. So, Alicorn Princess Twilight Sparkle. What does this phrase mean? Alicorn Princess Twilight Sparkle. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. I've received countless comments, linked to posts and videos, and seen images, opinions, angry, happy, ambivalent, etc. about the concept. What I want to do in this video is clarify exactly what Alicorn Princess Twilight Sparkle means to me. So here we see that I'm developing more of this rhythm. This is where I've become a lot more comfortable with writing, that like I feel confident about the way that I write, and that I can just string words together in fun ways. So like we've opened on this rhetorical question of what does this phrase mean, Alicorn Princess Twilight Sparkle, which is a great hook. And then I kind of go through this percussive listing of things, you know. I go from longer things listed to shorter things listed. I've received countless comments, links to posts and videos, and seen images, opinions, angry, happy, ambivalent, etc. about the concept. Like, you know, I've got these little flows in there, almost like a rap song. And this is really where we're going to see me getting into higher level writing. Like, around when I started writing videos is where I think my writing really started to take off. For starters, let's examine the word princess. Traditionally, the word princess refers to a woman who marries into nobility by marrying a prince. It did not originally refer to the daughter of a king or queen, but over time it eventually came to have that meaning as well, and is probably better understood that way in modern pop culture. When you think princess, you most likely think of Disney movies and fairy tales. You might think of traditional femininity. The idea of the princess who has been rescued by her prince is one of the most fought against images of feminism. Princesses are a contentious concept. They simultaneously remain a great icon of femininity and the most hated misrepresentation of what femininity is. When Lauren Faust conceptualized My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, she did not want there to be princesses. In her original concept, the land was ruled over by a queen, namely Queen Celestia. However, Faust was forced to change Celestia's title to princess because of the notion that in pop culture, queens have a tendency to be evil, whereas princesses are traditionally the heroine. We can consider this to be a loss. Yes, it would have been meaningful for Celestia to not be a princess just on the basis that princess was an easier sell to little girls. It's sad to think about, but it's the kind of casualty that is bound to happen when a show is fighting on the front lines of a social battle. Yeah, and that's a lot of stuff I use a lot, these sort of lofty imagery when I'm describing a show, that it's on the front lines of a social battle, you know. This is extremely modern, my writing style. But the loss here was solely over the word. Princess Celestia is still the single most powerful figure in all of Equestria. In fact, every single ruler of Equestria is a woman. In a reversal of the traditional meaning of prince versus princess, Prince Shining Armor actually married into his title by marrying Princess Cadance. In Equestria, the word princess does not mean a girl who married into the royal family. It means the highest power in the entire kingdom. And as a matter of fact, becoming princess in Equestria isn't even the same as becoming queen in our world. A queen is ordinarily born into her position and then trained to fulfill her role. In Equestria, princesses are trained to fulfill their role and then become a princess once they've earned their title. So yeah, this is we go through here, but where this all leads is eventually it becomes more personal and has this amazing ending where I say, TLDR, I'm a fucking Alicorn princess. This whole thing has a rising action to it, and there's something almost poetic about it. This is definitely some of my best writing up to this point, and I think you can easily tell how I'm weaving, very confidently analyzing this subject into trying to make it sound interesting, trying to phrase it in an interesting way. You know, I've gotten to the point where the idea of analyzing something is natural to me, and I'm just going all in on it. And then we start getting into the stuff where I will just completely go full gonzo and do the analysis where I'm weaving in and out of myself in the show. And this is a great example of that. The quick analysis of The Wind Rises. Knowing that I will die one day terrifies the shit out of me. Like most people, I do all that I can to put it out of mind, banking on the idea that I'm going to live a long, full life, or that immortality will become plausible, so long as I live until the technological singularity posited to occur in the new 40s. Most people seem vaguely incapable of comprehending the eventuality of death. They approach life with the expectation of permanence, vying for long-lasting jobs and relationships, and rarely escaping their comfort zone. People live with the minimal risk and attempt to keep themselves alive for as long as possible, often at the cost of actually being happy with their life in passing. Others, however, do not compromise on their happiness. They throw themselves into the things which make them passionate, regardless of consequence, unable to be satisfied with anything less than exactly what they want. Instead of chasing a permanence that doesn't exist, they embrace the transience of living. The Wind Rises is a film about one of these people. So at this point, my writing is very dense. Lots of big words that have lots of meanings. My vocabulary has grown significantly. I'm packing as much meaning into every sentence as possible, to the point that you kind of have to slow down and process it. And this was actually a problem, I think, for a while in my videos. It was something that was a big problem in the mid-section of my MLP videos and in some of my early anime ones, where it's too dense and like points are just kind of blowing past you, and I'm not really getting into the thick of what I'm talking about. Like some of these sentences are so lofty that they're just going to fly over a lot of people's heads because they have to process this in like 3 seconds as it's being said in a video, you know. So yeah, I think there's a little bit too much going on there. We've got the Sword Art Online analytical diatribe. This one is pretty much exactly what my writing style is like now, but I do think it's got more nitpicks than I would probably go into now. But you know, I'd probably stick more to the broad concept stuff. And I guess that's the last one I had opened up. So yeah, from there you can get a sense of my writing style going forward. I'd say the biggest change between that Wind Rises post and now is that, yeah, I will decompress a lot of my sentences deliberately and like try to go over something a little bit more to make sure that it's completely understandable. But yeah, that's basically the evolution of my writing style. You saw how I went from someone who just writes these nothing posts that are just about literally my reaction to something, not even saying anything about the content in question. Then we get into a period where I can kind of like review the thing, like I'm talking about it in itself, but I'm not really diving into the bones of it. I'm not really like looking at how the show's achieving what it's achieving. Then I start doing that. I start trying to figure out like who's responsible for this show being the way that it is. Why, like what elements of it make it special? What is good art? What is good music, you know? And then we get into more and more of that, and we get deeper and more specific, and then it gets to a point where, you know, the posts are kind of covering broader and broader subjects. They're trying to introduce my more unique perspectives. I'm trying to figure out what I can say that nobody else could say about something. You know, look at it a little bit more deeply, cut out the excess, cut down, simplify, get to the heart of what's interesting about what I'm saying, and then inject the personality back into it. You know, like cut it down to its most bare essentials and then figure out how do we say this with a little bit more flavor. Grow the vocabulary, grow the writing skill, grow the confidence, grow the literary devices and the ability to have like fun, punchy writing. And then eventually we get to a point where it's just fucking really fun to listen to and cool. So that's how I evolved as a writer. Sorry this video is a million fucking years long, but it was the only way I could think of to really make this point, to drag you through like how this evolution happens and how it's not something where like I can tell you one thing and you can just do that. Like, you really have to see what the fuck I'm talking about and what I learned and how shit I was before you're gonna get a full perspective on, like, where are you at? You know, like, what year of Digibro writing do you fall into? Like, if you're on the level of me in 2007, you just have a fucking long way to go. Whereas if you're on the level of me in 2010, it might really be that you just, you know, need a few guidelines or just to practice a little more and think more about what you're writing. So yeah, that's my exploration of my history as a writer. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.